The story begins with the Ren stands motionless before the academy's results board, sweat beading on his temple as he confronts the reality of his academic failure. Two fellow students stand nearby, mocking his grades and noting that despite his appearance, he shares no other qualities with the legendary brave hero. They scoff at his lack of progress, remarking that he should have been their senior by now. Ren grimaces, internally lamenting the misfortune of being born with the exact visage of Ren Maxwell. He walks through the academy halls, passing a statue of the Sword Emperor Eline, the brave hero, and the resemblance is undeniable. Ren acknowledges that while he might be a distant relative, he inherited none of the ancestors' legendary skills. He feels the weight of the scorn directed at him by peers who label him the fake brave hero, because his appearance is the only thing he shares with the legend. His mind drifts anxiously to the possibility of being held back another year due to his poor swordsmanship skills, which fail to match even his average classmates. Without warning, slender arms wrap tight around his chest from behind in a playful ambush. Ren flushes instantly, recognizing the embrace without needing to turn around, and identifies his assailant as his senior. A female voice teases him, asking him to guess who is holding him. He stammers, overwhelmed by the contact, and calls her Fear Senpai. Fear Nesferia releases him and spins around, smiling radiantly, admitting she sought to liven things up because he looked gloomy. She apologizes for worrying him while adjusting her uniform. Ren observes her, noting that she is likely the only person in the academy who speaks to him with genuine normalcy. He awkwardly asks how she performed on her exams, trying to shift the focus away from the earlier embrace. She dismisses her performance with a humble smile, claiming her grades are always the same. Ren praises her, knowing she likely ranked first again, and reflects that he can never beat a person of her caliber. He realizes that as an almighty genius and the first true talent since the academy's establishment, she must have received countless invitations from famous parties. He asks if she has decided who she will party with after her graduation. Fear confirms she has received several offers. She explains that the Holy Fiora Journey Academy exists to train students to form parties and search for the Encore, the record of the world written by the brave hero himself. Ren asks if she is also seeking the Encore, and she confirms it is certain. However, she suddenly reveals she will be dropping out of the academy soon, having already submitted her withdrawal form. Ren reacts with shock, protesting that graduation is only months away in the winter. Fear reassures him, explaining that an old friend has finally broken free from a seal and will accompany her on her journey. She muses that she might consider joining a party if one existed that could rival Eline's legendary group. Ren lists the members of that impossible party: the Demon Lord Elise, the strongest Dragon Princess Kills, and the Archangel Fear. He realizes aloud that his senior shares the same name as the legendary Archangel. He quickly dismisses the thought, rationalizing that old stories are often exaggerated through word of mouth. Fear watches him closely, asking if he believes the legend of Eline is mere fiction. Ren's demeanor shifts to excitement as he imagines the amazing journey of the strongest swordsman, Archangel, Demon Lord, and Dragon. He admits that just thinking about their awesome story excites him and gives him the strength to endure the scorn he faces at the academy. Fear smiles tenderly at his honesty, calling him wonderful and pure. She suddenly asks Ren to run an errand for her. As a reward, she teases him by offering a private study session just for the two of them in her room. Ren, completely flustered by the suggestive offer, stammers a rejection, promising to do it next year as he flees. Later, in the student town of Mstyre, Ren struggles under the weight of several heavy bags. He wonders what kind of tea party requires such a massive amount of supplies. He notices the sky darkening and assumes it will rain, but a piercing scream cuts through the air. A massive wyvern descends upon the town square, crushing buildings and sending debris flying. Ren stares in horror, cursing the misfortune of such an aggressive creature appearing in a populated area. Amidst the destruction, a mysterious girl with horns observes the chaos calmly, remarking that she did not expect to find delicious snacks in such a place. Ren, wielding only a small knife, grits his teeth and laments that there is nobody else around to help. The girl spots the bags of food Ren dropped and claims them as a gift for Fear. Ren shouts at her to get away, calling her an idiot for ignoring the danger. She retorts, offended by the insult, and asserts that she saw the food first. However, as she turns to face him, she freezes, her eyes widening in shock as she looks at Ren's face. She cries out the name Eline, believing the legendary hero stands before her alive. Before Ren can react, she tackles him to the ground just as the wyvern's tail sweeps over them, shielding him from the attack. She straddles him, overjoyed, claiming she has missed him and looked everywhere for him. She insists that even though he is human, he is special and couldn't possibly die after just 300 years. Ren groans in pain, urging her to run. The girl, believing Ren is Aline holding back, tells him he doesn't need to restrain himself against her race, the dragons. She commands him to defeat the cheeky bastard that has been following her with a single punch. Ren tries desperately to explain the misunderstanding. The wyvern roars and prepares another strike. Ren realizes the danger and screams at the girl to run away, calling her stupid again. He shoves her out of the path of the attack, taking the full force of the wyvern's blow himself. The impact smashes him into a brick wall, shattering the masonry around him. Ren collapses amidst the rubble, blood pouring from his head and vision fading to black. He struggles to breathe but comforts himself with the fact that he is still alive. He forces himself to stand, clutching his small knife, resolving to buy enough time for the academy reinforcements to arrive and for the girl to escape. He acknowledges that while he is not a brave hero, he can still act to save her. The girl looks at him with confusion, asking if he has a stomachache from eating something bad, unable to comprehend why Aline is so weak. She tries to jog his memory, reminding him that they used to journey together. She grabs him and shakes him violently. Ren gasps for air as she chokes him, finally managing to explain that Aline is a hero from 300 years ago and that humans do not live that long. He insists that people often say he looks like the hero, but he is merely Ren. The girl leans in close, inhaling his scent, and insists that he smells exactly like Aline. Ren blushes and pushes her away, firmly stating she has the wrong person. He explains that he might be a distant descendant or relative, but Aline himself is no longer here. Ren watches the girl, expecting her to be overcome with sadness at the realization that her friend is dead. Instead, her expression hardens into determination, and she declares that she will defeat the dragon herself. Ren yells at her to stop, but she ignores him. She leaps into the air, refusing to lose to a weakling like the wyvern. She declares that she, Dragon Princess Kills, will not be bested. Ren recognizes the name Kills as belonging to the legendary party member. Kills unleashes a devastating spell called Gravitational Collapse, mocking the wyvern for not knowing who she is. A massive sphere of dark energy crushes the wyvern and obliterates the surrounding street, leaving a giant crater in its wake. Kills floats gently down to the ground as the dust settles. Ren stares at her from the ground, stunned, wondering if she is the real legend come to life. This encounter marks the beginning of the story between the fake brave hero and the legendary Dragon Princess. The Dragon Princess descends from the sky, her boots striking the cobblestone pavement with a heavy, deliberate thud that echoes through the quiet alleyway. She stands tall against the backdrop of the towering, arched masonry, her gaze fixing instantly upon the young man seated on the ground before her. Ren, the boy on the pavement, stares up, paralyzed by the sudden arrival of the girl who possesses an aura of overwhelming power. His mind races, struggling to process the identity of the figure looming over him, recognizing her instantly as the entity from the legends. Without hesitation, the girl reaches for the bags Ren clutches, her eyes locking onto the prize within. Ren scrambles to intervene, his voice rising in panic as he asserts ownership over the goods. He explains desperately that he purchased the items from the most famous sweets shop in the entire town, implying their value and his rightful claim. The girl, undeterred by his protests, offers a sharp, dismissive retort, suggesting that he should simply hope she finds the confiscated treats delicious. She rationalizes the theft with a warrior's logic, reminding him that she recently dispatched a wyvern on his behalf, and thus, the sweets serve as necessary compensation for her labor. She comments on his surprising reasonableness for a human, sealing the one-sided transaction with a tone of finality. Dark, heavy clouds begin to swirl above the academy spires, signaling the arrival of a torrential downpour. Ren stands alone in the courtyard, looking up as the first drops of rain begin to fall, his mind drifting back to the terrifying display of power he witnessed moments ago. He recalls the sheer magnitude of the magic the girl unleashed, a force that seemed to belong to the realm of demons and angels rather than mortals. The memory of her strength leaves him in awe, forcing him to acknowledge that the girl is far more than she appears. Ren navigates the opulent, high-ceilinged corridors of the academy, the bags of sweets heavy in his hands. His thoughts churn with suspicion and confusion regarding the girl's ignorance of history. He notes that she speaks as if she is unaware of the death of Aline, the legendary Sword Emperor. He recalls the historical text stating that the three great princesses perished during the End War, a fact that contradicts the living, breathing presence he just encountered. Doubts plague him. He wonders if she is truly one of the legendary figures or merely a powerful impostor, but he cannot shake the feeling that her lack of knowledge is genuine. He approaches a large set of double doors, composing himself before entering, dismissing the impossible notion that the legends have returned. Rin steps into the room, apologizing for the delay to his upperclassmen, Fear. However, the atmosphere inside the room freezes him in place. He finds not only Fear but also the girl, Kils, standing there, the air thick with tension. Fear, the archangel, turns her gaze toward him, her expression serious as she bridges the gap between the past and the present. She reveals a fragment of memory, recalling that the hero Eline spent his final years writing something specific, a record known as the Encore. The revelation hangs in the air. Fear addresses Kils directly, deducing that the Dragon Princess has also returned to this era in search of the elusive Encore. Kils stands by the window, the rain lashing against the glass, and listens as Fear elaborates on the legend. The Archangel explains that the Encore is rumored to be a chronicle written by Eline in the period between the end of the war and his eventual death from sickness, a time frame that remains a blank spot in history for the rest of the world. Ren listens, his eyes widening in disbelief as the conversation validates myths he thought were mere stories. Kils remains skeptical, suggesting that the Encore might be nothing more than a fabrication created by humans to romanticize the hero's final days. She argues that up until the moment she was sealed, her body was in perfect condition, implying that she would have known if such a record existed. She recalls that in the aftermath of the war, they were all too consumed with recovering from fatal damage to concern themselves with writing memoirs. Ren, standing at the periphery of this clash of legends, can only mutter his disbelief at the absurdity of the situation. Kils turns, her expression hardening into determination. She declares that regardless of the record's provenance, they must find the Encore. She reasons that Eline might have left behind messages specifically for them, his surviving comrades. Her competitive spirit flares as she insists they must locate the document before anyone else in the world lays claim to it. Fear agrees, and the reality of the situation crashes down on Ren. He processes the impossible truth: the girl who felled a wyvern with a single strike is the Dragon Princess Kils, and the strongest student in the academy is actually the Archangel Fear. The three great princesses who fought alongside Sword Emperor Eline 300 years ago are not dead, they are standing right in front of him. The weight of the legend becoming reality presses down on the room. Kils, however, immediately diffuses the tension by cheerfully consuming the sweets she stole, claiming Rin gave them to her out of generosity. She fabricates a story about nearly fighting a human for them before finding them on the street, a blatant lie that Rin immediately clocks. She offers the snacks to Fear as a gift, attempting to pivot the conversation away from the heavy topics of war and death. Fear, seeing through the deception with divine intuition, calls her a liar instantly. Fear turns her attention to Ren, asking Kils who the boy is. Kils introduces him casually, identifying him as Ren, a 17-year-old middle-rank knight student at the academy. She notes the irony of him being a knight, just like Eline was. Ren, uncomfortable with the comparison, looks away, mumbling that he cannot be compared to a hero and that he is nothing like the legendary figure. Fear interjects, revealing that Ren is the very reason she descended to the mortal realm. She explains that her interest goes beyond mere curiosity. Ren possesses a scent identical to Eline's, so potent that she initially mistook the boy for the hero himself. She insists the resemblance is not merely superficial, hinting at a deeper connection. Kils questions if Ren could be Eline's reincarnation, noting that while reincarnation is a secret demon art, it is theoretically possible for him to have inherited Eline's strength. However, Fear's expression shifts to one of resignation. She dismisses the reincarnation theory, citing Ren's performance against the wyvern. She reasons that if he truly possessed Eline's strength, he would not have struggled against such a beast. She concludes that he is merely a look-alike, a hollow echo of the man they once knew. Despite this disappointment, Fear admits she decided to stay at the academy a while longer, deviating from her original plan to return to heaven immediately after assessing him. Fear gazes out at the students training in the courtyard, her eyes softening. She observes that Ren understands his difference from Eline better than anyone else. She watches him work tirelessly, improving himself every day, driven by a desire to surpass his own limitations. She confesses that she wants to cheer him on, to witness his success with her own eyes as he battles against the scorn of those who call him the fake brave hero. Ren, who had been listening from the hallway, is struck by Fear's words. Her desire to follow in the footsteps of the heroes resonates with him, mirroring his own motivations. He realizes that his hard work is valid, confirmed by the Archangel herself. Overwhelmed by the validation and the confirmation that the legends are real, he flees down the corridor, his resolve hardening. Inside the room, Fear suddenly snaps her head toward the door, realizing they have been overheard. She identifies the eavesdropper as Ren, her expression shifting to one of realization. Kills looks towards the door, feeling a pang of guilt for her earlier harshness. Fear explains that Ren is merely a nickname and that his true burden lies in his title, the fake brave hero. Fear elaborates on Ren's plight. Although his strength is acceptable for a student knight, it pales in comparison to the legend he resembles. Because he looks so much like Eline, he is constantly compared to the perfect hero in every aspect of his life. This resemblance causes him to be unfairly graded and given low scores, as he can never measure up to the impossible standard set by the Sword Emperor. Fear points out the cruelty of his isolation, asking if he can even find people willing to form a party with him when he stands in such a massive shadow. The Archangel's face darkens with empathy. She fears that Ren will never be able to find acceptance. She recalls the first time she met Eline, noting that he was the only being who treated her normally, despite the fear she inspired in humans, angels, and demons alike. She asserts that just as Eline accepted her, there needs to be someone who will accept Ren for who he is. Fear turns on Kils, challenging the Dragon Princess's perception. She asks if Kils truly believes Ren tried to protect her from the Wyvern because he thought he could win. She forces Kils to acknowledge the truth. Ren stood his ground to protect her, knowing full well he would likely die. Fear draws a parallel between Kils' past solitude, caused by her overwhelming power, and Ren's current isolation. She reminds Kils that a brave hero once saved her from that solitude, and suggests that fate has brought them together so Kils can now do the same for Ren. She commands Kils to reach out her hand to the isolated fake hero. Kils blushes, realizing the trap Fear has set. She understands now that the Archangel chose this academy for their reunion specifically to facilitate this encounter. She smiles, conceding to Fear's machinations, though she notes that the Wyvern attack was a variable not even Fear could have predicted. Outside, the rain pours relentlessly. A metal practice sword stands embedded in the mud. Ren's hand grips the hilt, his knuckles white. He pulls the weapon free with a shout, his body soaked and trembling. He stands before a row of wooden training posts, swinging the blade with desperate repetition. He drives the sword into the wood, gasping for breath, his mind replaying the legends he admired as a child. He had always wondered if the stories were real, and now that he knows they are, the knowledge fuels his drive. He pushes his exhausted body to move, determined to bridge the gap between his reality and the legends. A small, glowing creature, a fire spirit, hovers in the rain, watching him. Ren pauses, noting the rare spirit that usually hides from human eyes. He wonders if it understands him, asking the silent observer if it is worried about him. Ren smiles weakly at the spirit, assuring it that he is fine, though he warns it about catching a cold. He turns back to the posts, raising his sword for another set, refusing to yield to the weather or his fatigue. He swings with everything he has, but his body betrays him. He loses his footing in the slick mud and crashes face-first into the ground, his sword flying from his grasp. He lies in the filth, his strength completely spent, gasping for air. Lying face down in the mud, Ren berates himself. He calls the sight of his failure uncool, accepting the validity of the fake brave hero insult. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the sound of the rain, commanding him to stand up. Ren looks up to see Kils standing over him. She apologizes, her cheeks flushed, admitting that she got too excited earlier because of his resemblance to Eline. She tells him to never forget the brave spirit he showed when he protected her from the Wyvern. She then makes an offer that changes everything. She will teach him the Sword Emperor's techniques. Ren stares at her, stunned. Kils sets her condition. As long as he can endure the training, she will form a party with him. It is a monumental offer, but Ren hesitates, his shock keeping him on the ground. Kils, impatient and embarrassed, snaps at him, asking how long he intends to make her wait. Ren declines her help to stand, determined to rise on his own, but his legs wobble. Ren finally stands, his face beaming with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. He declares his dream to journey all over the outside world. Kils looks at him, remarking that for some reason, he looks good covered in mud. She notices his hands shaking violently and asks if he is cold. Ren tries to play it off, calling her a dirty bum in a weak attempt at banter. Kil's demeanor shifts. She flushes deeply, her pride warring with her embarrassment. She declares herself the strongest person in history and a dragon princess, trying to maintain her dignity. She stammers that she has never asked a human to join her party before, emphasizing that this is her first time. Ren, overwhelmed by her intensity, tries to calm her down, but she snaps. She grabs a recovery potion and forcefully jams it into his mouth, shouting at him to just take it. She threatens to train him so hard he will regret it, masking her vulnerability with aggression. She blames him for making her do something she isn't used to, showing kindness. Suddenly, giant wings unfurl, and Archangel Fear descends from the sky, landing gracefully beside them. She greets Ren with a smile, interrupting Kil's frantic nursing. Fear presses herself against Ren, pleading with him not to forget about her. Fear formally reintroduces herself as Archangel Fear, confessing that she has wanted to hold him like this from the moment she saw him. Kils, incensed by the display, calls Fear an attention whore. Fear ignores the insult, telling Ren that he can continue to call her Fear Senpai, because she has grown used to it. The situation descends into chaos. Fear declares that she will take care of Ren at night, while Kils can have him during the day. Kils, outraged, shouts that Ren will be busy training with her and demands he submit his withdrawal form by tonight because they are leaving to search for the Encore tomorrow. Ren, caught between the two legendary forces, panics. He yells that it's too soon, that he hasn't prepared anything, and that he isn't mentally ready for such a sudden departure. The two princesses ignore his protests, each grabbing an arm and dragging him forward. Ren struggles in vain, shouting for them to let go as he is dragged off into the horizon, his new life as the companion to the world's strongest legends beginning not with a majestic ceremony, but with a kidnapping. The journey continues through a sun-drenched settlement where ancient stone structures stand amidst verdant trees. As the party navigates the cobblestone path, the atmosphere buzzes with the activity of other adventurers coming and going. Fear, the teasing angel, clings tightly to Ren, her playful affection causing a scene, prompting Kairi to intervene and demand she release him, noting that Ren is visibly bothered. Run, flustered, attempts to defuse the situation, assuring them he is fine, but Fear immediately twists his words, offering to teach him night lessons with a suggestive tone. As they walk, the conversation shifts to the state of the world compared to the era of legends 300 years ago. The party notes that while skill specialties have diversified, the raw power of individuals seems to have diminished. Kairi turns her gaze to Ren, inquiring about his status as a master and demanding to know his specific rank. The air fills with the names of various classes: enchanter, martial artist, spirit user, thief, healer, hunter, highlighting the complex hierarchy that now governs adventurers. Ren hesitates, his eyes averting hers as he stammers out the truth. He admits to being a third-rank master, which he shamefully acknowledges is the lowest tier. Kairi stares at him blankly for a moment before declaring that they simply need to gather more members for their party. She brings up their ultimate goal, finding the Encore, the record of the end of the world. With boundless optimism, she assures Ren that he will reach the level of the legendary hero Eline in no time, volunteering herself to train him personally. Ren recoils slightly, questioning her overwhelming optimism given his current lack of strength. Undeterred, Fear chimes in, instructing Ren not to worry about his current standing. She reveals that in terms of combat performance, they need at least one more capable fighter. Ren's eyes widen as he realizes who she means. Fear confirms his suspicion. They are heading to the next town to recruit their fourth comrade, the current Demon King, Elise. She describes Elise as the girl who once traveled with them, the master of the underworld, cementing the gravity of their reunion. Later that night, the group settles into a rustic, two-story log cabin surrounded by the dark silhouette of the forest. The moon hangs high, illuminating the clearing where Kairi confronts Ren. She demands he hand over his sword, her demeanor shifting from playful to serious. She comments on the invigorating night breeze, claiming it spikes her energy, and confidently states that if the skill is purely physical, she can replicate it easily. She asks Ren if he is capable of wielding the blade properly. Kairi takes the weapon, her eyes narrowing as she commands Ren to focus on the sensation she is about to demonstrate. The wind rustles through the canopy, dislodging leaves that drift slowly toward the ground. Suddenly, Kairi moves. Her strike is a blur, the blade glowing with an ethereal light as it spears a falling leaf midair. Ren gasps, asking if there is a trick to the movement, But Kairi dismisses the notion. She explains the technique. He must spear 3 leaves the exact moment they overlap. She reveals that he had been swinging his sword at raindrops previously, but to master this, he must seize the smallest of targets, a drop of rain, a fire's ember, and pierce it instantly. She acknowledges that the hero Eline practiced this same technique, though Eline's swordsmanship remains leagues beyond Ren's current ability. Ren, galvanized by the challenge, accepts the training regime, agreeing to start by attempting to pierce just 2 leaves. Meanwhile, inside the warm, dimly lit cabin, Fear lounges on a bed, watching the scene outside through the window. When Kairi returns, Fear teases her, calling the dragon princess sneaky for enjoying the training session with Ren so much. Kairi flushes, denying the accusation and insisting she was merely instructing him. Fear laments that she also wanted to spend time with Ren, noting how honest and interesting the boy is. Fear observes that Kairi seems relieved and upbeat again, suggesting that being around Ren has lifted her spirits. Kairi turns away, her expression hardening slightly as she brushes off Fear's teasing. She snaps at Fear not to touch or hug her, complaining about the angel's body heat. The conversation turns serious as they discuss Ren's potential. Kairi questions whether Ren will ever become as strong as they were during the Great Battle 300 years ago. She admits that neither she nor Fear possesses the same power they wielded in the past, and she worries about the upcoming battles against the 5 great calamities. Fear suggests that Kairi is overthinking things and that the rigorous training she is imposing on Ren stems from this anxiety. Fear warns that the challenge might be too much for Ren at his current level, but Kairi insists she is simply replicating the training Eline used. Outside, under the cold moonlight, Ren struggles. He swings his sword repeatedly, sweat pouring down his face, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Every time he strikes, the wind pressure from his blade pushes the leaves away before he can make contact. He realizes that if he holds back to avoid the wind pressure, he won't have the speed to hit the leaves, but if he strikes with full power he rips them apart. He grits his teeth, forcing himself to recall Kairi's words, "Seize the instant, pierce through." Ren centers himself, the image of the piercing blade burning in his mind. He acknowledges the vast gap between him and Eline, understanding that the hero's skill is far beyond his reach, but he refuses to give up. He tells himself that this is the minimum requirement to stand by their side. He focuses on a single falling leaf, then another. His eyes narrow, tracking their trajectory. In a burst of motion, Ren lunges. His sword creates a clean line through the air, intercepting the drifting foliage. He freezes in his follow-through, his chest heaving. Slowly he looks at his blade. Impaled upon the steel are 2 leaves, pierced perfectly through their centers. He stares in disbelief, wondering if it was beginner's luck, but the evidence is undeniable. A wave of triumph washes over him. He has taken a step closer to his goal. Filled with adrenaline, Ren sprints back toward the cabin, eager to share his success. He bursts through the door, shouting for Kairi to look at what he achieved. He freezes. Inside the room, Kairi stands half-dressed, clutching a frilly dress to her chest, her skin exposed to the cool air. Her eyes widen in shock, and her face erupts in a crimson blush. Ren stares, paralyzed by the sight. Kairi's embarrassment instantly converts into magical rage. She mutters that he has some nerve before unleashing a torrent of wind magic, blasting Ren out of the room with a shout to blow away. Ren slams against the wall outside, groaning. Moments later, he sits awkwardly in the room while Kairi, now fully dressed but still blushing furiously, agrees to hear him out, though she refuses to make eye contact. Ren, still dazed, accidentally mutters that she looked cute, prompting another glare. He quickly pivots to the training, explaining his success. Kairi regains her composure, crossing her arms. Internally she is stunned. She frankly expected it to take him a week to succeed, but he managed it in a single night. Outwardly, she maintains her stern mentor persona. She praises him briefly but immediately moves the goalpost, declaring that at this rate, he must pierce 3 leaves by tomorrow. Ren reacts with shock at the sudden increase in difficulty. Kairi dismisses his complaints, stating that this is merely the beginning if he wishes to reach Eline's level, and eventually, he must be able to do it with his eyes closed. Ren stands awkwardly in the bedroom, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion. Kairi sits on the edge of the bed, her expression unreadable. Ren points out that it is late and asks if she isn't going to bed, implying she should leave so he can sleep in his room. Kairi looks at him with innocent determination and declares she is sleeping with him. Ren panics, asking why. Kairi ignores his fluster, commanding him to hurry up and get in bed. As they settle under the covers, Ren, face burning, asks if she used to do this with Eline 300 years ago. Kairi explains it is a dragon habit to sleep with those they trust, similar to how her clan sleeps together. However, a shadow passes over her face as she admits she never got to sleep with Eline. She reveals that the Sword Emperor spent every night training alone, his strength the result of effort far surpassing anyone else's, rather than innate talent. Ren is struck by this revelation about the hero he idolizes. Before he can ask more, Kairi abruptly kicks him, declaring that is enough talking for tonight. She rolls over, ending the conversation. Silence falls over the room. Ren lies awake, hyper-aware of the dragon princess sleeping beside him. He glances over to see Kairi smiling peacefully in her sleep, looking completely relaxed. He realizes he is seeing a side of the strongest in the world that few ever witness. While Kairi finds the situation relaxing, Ren stares up at the wooden ceiling, lamenting that with her so close, sleeping is going to be impossible. Ren and his companions arrive at the bustling entrance of Enge, the city built to commemorate the legendary hero Eline. The atmosphere vibrates with celebration as confetti rains down around them, but Ren hesitates, overwhelmed by the grandeur of the location. Beside him, the enthusiastic companion, Elise, chides him for his reluctance, accusing him of acting like a child despite the gravity of their journey. They stand before a monument referencing the Encore of the world, the record of the end times, symbolizing the peace Eline brokered between the Archangel and the Demon King. Fear, the tall, silver-haired angel, explains the significance of the weapon depicted in the lore, the spirit sword Vierge. She notes that Eline used this very blade to halt the devastating war that once ravaged the realms. As they delve deeper into the lore, Fear elaborates on the sword's properties, revealing it carries the enchantment of a great fairy. She reminisces about the past, noting that this was one of Eline's weapons from his novice days. Ren, stunned by the revelation, stammers at the idea of the legendary hero having a starting-out phase. Fear recounts a specific memory where an arrogant challenger attempted to school the young Eline, only to be soundly defeated by the novice hero. Elise, listening to the tale, giggles with a mix of malice and amusement, finding the story of the hero picking fights with the Archangel and Demon King while still green, thoroughly entertaining. The group moves away from the main thoroughfare, guided by Fear toward a secluded location. Ren resists, his heels digging into the ground as he is physically dragged into a dark, narrow alleyway, protesting that he doesn't want to keep Elise waiting. The transition from the bright city streets to the shadowy backstreet is jarring, and Ren voices his discomfort, questioning if this desolate path is truly the correct way. The alley appears empty, devoid of the festive life characterizing the rest of Enge. However, the silence of the alley proves deceptive. Ren stumbles upon a grisly scene, bodies litter the ground, leaning against the brick walls in unnatural postures. He recoils in shock, his eyes widening as he surveys the defeated thugs. Upon closer inspection, Ren realizes the injuries are not from conventional weapons. The victims bear severe burn marks and patches of frostbite. Concern overrides his fear, and he calls out to one of the slumped figures, asking if they are okay. Before he can receive an answer, a voice commands him to leave them be. It is Elise, stepping forward with a cold, satisfied demeanor. She confesses that the thugs mocked her for her childlike appearance, so she retaliated by roasting them with her magic. Elise sits perched atop a wooden crate in the dim alley, looking down at Ren with a haughty expression. She wears a revealing outfit with pigtails, a stark contrast to the violence she just inflicted. She comments on Ren's resemblance to Eline but dismisses him as looking kinda weak. She turns her attention to Kjels, mentioning the seal and expressing relief that she did not have to undergo reincarnation and regression like herself. Elise formally introduces herself to Ren as the former Demon King, explaining that her current diminished form is the result of reincarnating 10 years prior. She proposes a partnership, suggesting they become pals. The conversation shifts to their primary objective, the search for the Encore. Elise expresses interest but clarifies her priorities. She is more concerned with restoring her original body than finding the world record. She suggests that if humans find the Encore first, it would be simpler to just steal it from them. Fear interjects, explaining that Eline hid the Encore in a location known only to his 3 comrades, Fear, Elise, and Kjels, to prevent it from being easily discovered. Fear deduces that since countless searchers have failed to find it, the hiding spot must be unique, possibly within the underworld. This possibility secures Elise's cooperation, as she acknowledges the logic. Elise then reveals a critical complication hindering their quest. She informs Ren that her former subordinate, Akendia, the demon general of Blaze and the underworld's strongest demon, is currently rampaging on Earth. Akendia, one of the 5 great disasters, abandoned her post after Elise retired and is now acting unchecked. Elise feels a sense of responsibility toward her former guard and insists on dealing with Akendia before they can proceed with the search for the Encore. She lays out the terms of their alliance. If Ren and the party assist her in neutralizing Akendia, she will aid them in locating the Encore. Elise admits that in her current state, she and her companions are not as strong as they once were, but she believes that together, they are invincible. She looks to Ren for his agreement, wanting him to understand the weight of forming a party with the 3 legendary beings. Ren stares at his own hand, contemplating the danger. He acknowledges that the foes ahead will vastly outmatch him and that the journey will be fraught with peril. Despite the overwhelming odds, Ren steels his resolve. He clenches his fist, declaring that he cannot change himself if he quits now. He commits to pushing onward until they find the Encore, solidifying his determination to join the legendary trio. The solemnity of the moment is immediately undercut as the group shares a drink to seal the pact. Ren violently chokes and spews his drink, overwhelmed by the taste or the situation, prompting disgust from his new companions. Elise and the others recoil, labeling the display dirty and not a good start to their partnership. The scene shifts to the open plains as the party travels toward their destination. The landscape is vast and grassy, a welcome change from the city. Elise runs ahead playfully, enjoying the sensation of the grass and expressing a desire to take off her shoes. Ren confirms their destination is the great volcano of Gallia, where Akendia is believed to be located. He questions why a powerful demon general would come to Earth. Elise speculates that Akendia has likely established a base at the volcano, given her affinity for Blaze. Ren worries about the threat Akendia poses if left unchecked, though Elise doubts the demon intends to conquer Earth. As they walk, they discuss the influx of reckless humans heading to Gallia. Elise notes that fame-seeking parties treat hunting Akendia as a challenge, often leading to their deaths. She explains that they took an unpaved shortcut to arrive quickly and hopefully prevent more senseless victims. Suddenly, the terrain shifts as they enter a darker, wooded area at the foot of the incline. Elise stops and turns to face Ren, her playful demeanor vanishing. She states that while Fear and Kjels may have acknowledged him, she has not. She admits she still does not know the extent of his capabilities. To test him, she summons massive, serpentine constructs made of rock from the earth, which tower over Ren with glowing eyes. Ren reacts instantly, drawing his sword to face the sudden threat. Elise, smiling with a mix of challenge and encouragement, tells Ren to do his very best as the giant stone snakes prepare to strike. Ren faces the towering stone serpent, the sheer scale of the monster casting a shadow over his defiant stance as he calculates the impossibility of a direct defense against such overwhelming mass. He realizes with a click of his tongue that this trial is exactly what Fear had intended for him, forcing him to adapt or perish. The giant rock snake rears back, its scales formed of jagged, impenetrable stone, and lunges forward with enough force to pulverize the earth where Ren stands. As the massive jaw snaps shut near him, Ren analyzes the mechanics of the impact, understanding that a direct block is not an option. The sheer weight of the beast would shatter his sword upon contact. He resolves instantly that since defense is impossible, he must rely entirely on evasion to survive the encounter. Ren grips his blade, his eyes focused and sharp, watching the trajectory of the beast as it prepares for another strike. The serpent lunges again, its body blurring with speed, but Ren spirals around the attack, his body twisting in midair to navigate the deadly proximity of the stone fangs. He shouts a taunt at the creature, declaring its speed inferior to that of a wyvern, using the insult to fuel his own momentum. With a burst of kinetic energy, he capitalizes on the monster's missed strike. Ren lands a decisive blow, his sword flashing as he severs the animated stone, causing the serpent's head to detach from its body with a spray of debris. The massive stone carcass collapses, sending dust billowing into the air while Ren stands amidst the rubble, panting heavily from the exertion. Fear, observing the battle with a satisfied smile, signals the end of the session, cheerfully bidding the destroyed construct farewell. The massive stone segments of the snake's body crash into the ground, raising a cloud of dust that engulfs the battlefield. Fear compliments Ren on his performance, her tone light and approving, noting that he did surprisingly well given the circumstances. Ren, however, is visibly shaken, trembling as he laments the sheer amount of effort required to survive the ordeal. Fear remarks that they still have a long trek ahead to reach the great volcano, dismissing the combat as a mere warm-up. She admits to him that she initially perceived him as weak due to his status as a student knight, but witnessing his combat instincts has revealed a hidden well of potential within him. Later, the group establishes a camp in the dense woodland as night falls. Elise tends to a large cauldron suspended over a campfire, stirring the contents, while Rin stretches his arms, his body aching from the earlier battle. Elise announces that dinner is ready, calling the group to gather around the fire. Ren presents his creation with a confident flourish, though the contents of the bowl are a horrifying, bubbling purple sludge that defies culinary logic. Upon seeing the visceral horror of the stew, the girls immediately retreat into their tent, offering polite but firm refusals. Ren tries to salvage the situation, insisting that despite its grotesque appearance, the flavor is guaranteed to be excellent. His plea falls on deaf ears as the girls zip the tent shut, leaving him alone with his creation. Ren takes a bite of the stew, and for a moment, his soul appears to leave his body, escaping through his mouth in a ghostly wisp as the flavor overwhelms his senses. Elise watches with concern, observing the innocent expression on Ren's face as he tries to endure the meal he created to make them happy. Ren freezes, his face draining of color, while Fear and Elise peek out from the safety of the tent. Ren calls out to them weakly, asking what is wrong, but his voice is strained. He suddenly jerks back to consciousness, realizing the absurdity of the stew's potency, and questions what exactly he just ate. He notices the girls have already settled into sleep to avoid the meal, leaving him to recover from his near-death culinary experience alone. Fear sniffs the air delicately, her nose twitching as she detects a peculiar scent. Ren, still recovering from the meal, looks over as Fear approaches him, her expression serious. She leans in close, declaring that she smells a spirit clinging to him. Ren is confused, admitting that while he failed his spirit lessons in school, he has occasionally noticed a presence floating near him. Fear is taken aback, realizing her nose was accurate, just as a small, glowing spirit shaped like a tiny dragon manifests in the air between them. Ren looks at the small creature with a mixture of surprise and familiarity, asking if it has been following him. Fear, panicked by the sudden appearance of the entity, shouts for Elise to wake up immediately. Elise and the other girl emerge from the tent, rubbing sleep from their eyes, confused by the commotion. They stare in shock at the spirit floating casually next to Ren. Ren asks innocently if there is something wrong with the creature, unaware of the significance of its presence. Elise demands to know the meaning of this, asking Ren if he summoned the spirit. Ren clarifies that he performed no ritual, the creature simply appeared on its own accord. Elise acknowledges the truth in his statement but remains troubled, explaining that spirits are mysterious creatures that lend power to humans, yet they are fundamentally different from angels, demons, or dragons. She elaborates that spirits exist without material bodies, and their methods of creation and disappearance remain an enigma even to beings like herself. Fear interjects, noting that unlike spirits, demons and other races have physical forms or reincarnate into them. Elise continues her lecture, stating that spirits are notoriously difficult to understand and only lend their power to humans they genuinely like. She explains that throughout history, very few humans have been able to establish a bond with spirits, and those who do usually rely on spirit armaments to house the power. Elise reveals that there is a class of humans known as Ancienters, who can summon and command spirits directly without the need for equipment. She posits that if Ren is not using an armament, the only explanation for the spirit's appearance is that he is one of these incredibly rare individuals. She emphasizes the rarity, suggesting there might be only one such person in the world at this moment. The girls discuss Ren's history, recalling that he never showed any aptitude for rituals or spirit armaments during his time at school. They hypothesize that his complete lack of talent in standard spirit magic might be the price he paid for the latent ability of ancient summoning. Fear grins, teasing Ren by suggesting that all his talent was funneled into this one ability because an idiot can only focus on one thing at a time. Ren looks at them, unsure if he is being praised for his rarity or insulted for his intelligence. Ren suggests that perhaps the spirit just decided to stick with him on its own, reiterating that he really didn't do anything to cause it. Fear decides to test the theory immediately. She instructs Ren to try commanding the spirit, specifically asking him to order it to move to Elise's hand. Ren hesitates but agrees to try. Elise asks Ren when he first started hearing the voices of spirits, causing Ren to blink in confusion. He asks voice, indicating he has never heard such a thing. Elise explains that the summoning words used by Ancienters are not audible to angels, demons, or dragons, as they exist on a specific frequency reserved for spirit voices. She states that the ability to command spirits relies on communicating with them through this channel. Rin looks at the small spirit, realizing that he is supposed to be hearing a voice, yet he hears nothing. Elise encourages him, calling this a rare opportunity to test his potential to command fire spirits. Rin focuses his attention on the small floating creature, trying to tune his senses to hear something voice-like. He concentrates, extending his hands towards the spirit, attempting to establish a connection. The spirit glows brightly, responding to his focus. Suddenly, with a soft sound, the spirit vanishes completely from the air. Rin looks at the empty space, baffled. Elise asks for the outcome, and Rin bluntly reports that it vanished. He adds that this is how it usually goes. The spirit appears and disappears entirely at its own whim. Elise looks contemplative, noting that despite the disappearance, the tiny spirit did seem to accept Ren's request, which implies a connection existed. She finds it a mystery that Ren cannot hear the spirit's voice despite this apparent bond. Ren reiterates that he was concentrating hard but heard absolutely nothing. Fear suggests that perhaps the spirit was simply weak. She then offers a radical solution, joking that if they throw Ren into a bonfire, the intense presence of fire might make it easier for him to hear the voice of a fire spirit while he burns. Ren looks at her with alarm, asking if she is kidding, but Fear moves on to a more practical plan. She decides that she and Elise will teach Ren the basic rituals to help him draw out his potential as an Ancienter. Fear emphasizes that the ability to use spirits is versatile and powerful, but mastering it will require great effort. She tells him that in future training he must concentrate on dealing with spirits to awaken the ability that only he possesses. Fear yawns, declaring that now that the excitement is over, she is going back to sleep. She reminds him that it will take 3 days to reach the great volcano of Gallia. As Fear turns to leave, Rin reaches out, intending to practice his grip for his special sword training. However, his hand misses its mark and firmly grasps Fear's rear end. Fear screams, her face flushing a deep crimson as she realizes where he is touching. She spins around, demanding to know where he thinks he is putting his hands. Fear delivers a swift, punishing kick to Rin, sending him reeling. She clutches her backside, tears of embarrassment in her eyes, and shouts that he touched her most sensitive place. Ren, holding his bruised face, is confused by her extreme reaction. Fear yells at him, calling him an idiot, and explains that he grabbed the specific spot where a dragon's tail would usually be located, a zone of high sensitivity for her kind. Ren is left in pain and confusion as the group retires for the night, the training session ending on a chaotic note. The crimson glow of the great volcano of Gallia dominates the horizon, its summit spewing a ceaseless torrent of fire and ash that paints the sky in apocalyptic shades of orange and black. The sheer scale of the eruption dwarfs the surrounding landscape, signaling the lethal environment that awaits anyone foolish enough to approach the lair of the demon general of Blaze, Akendia. Rin gazes up at the blazing cliffs, the intense heat radiating even from this distance, and notes that he can already smell the sulfur and burning rock carried on the wind. Beside him, Elise peers curiously at his expression, her twin tails swaying as she asks if the looming threat of the town and the volcano has struck a nerve. Rin admits that the mere act of entering the base town Geo, the final staging ground before the climb, brings the reality of their mission crashing down on him. The group descends into Geo, a fortress city built from pale stone that contrasts sharply against the dark, volcanic slopes rising behind it. The streets teem with activity, packed with armored knights, mercenaries, and adventurers, all drawn by the call to subjugate the demon general. Ren navigates the crowded cobblestone thoroughfares, his eyes scanning the multitude of parties gathering for the same desperate cause. They arrive at the reception counter to register their presence, finding themselves in a queue behind heavy infantry and seasoned warriors. The receptionist requests their party name, prompting a moment of hesitation among the group. Ren falters, realizing they hadn't settled on a title, and worries about selecting something appropriate for their station. Elise, bursting with manic energy, throws her hand up and suggests a grandiose, paragraph-long title extolling the noble, beautiful, strongest silver dragon princess, and Elise the cutie and her merry followers. The sheer absurdity of the name hangs in the air. Kjels, standing quietly with her wings tucked, suggests that anonymity might be a strategic advantage given their high-profile members. Rin swiftly agrees, bypassing Elise's theatrical suggestion in favor of Fear's pragmatic choice. Special Duty Code 09, subjugation of the 5 great disasters. The receptionist accepts the registration, instructing them to coordinate with other parties departing the next morning. As they step away from the counter, a voice cuts through the ambient noise, dripping with derision. A group of 3 knights approaches, their leader a blond man with a scar crossing his cheek, flanked by 2 smirk-wearing companions. He identifies Rin immediately, not by name, but by the slur that has followed him through his academic life. Fake hero. Rin stiffens, recognizing the trio as upperclassmen from his school. The leader mocks Ren's presence, questioning why a failing student would be at the edge of the world instead of preparing for a graduation he is unlikely to pass. The upperclassman turns his sneer toward the girls, expressing disbelief that Fear, the top student of their academy, would degrade herself by forming a party with a failure like Ren. He dismisses their alliance as a whim, accusing Fear of merely playing around with Ren because he bears a superficial resemblance to the legendary hero. The insult lands heavily, targeting the core of Ren's insecurity. Elise bristles, her expression darkening as she prepares to lash out at the disrespect. Before Elise can act, Fear intervenes. Her voice drops to a lethal whisper, commanding the human to control his tongue. She stands tall, her gaze piercing the upperclassman with the intensity of a predator viewing prey, effectively silencing his taunts. The air around them grows heavy with her aura. The upperclassman flinches, his arrogance fracturing under the pressure of the silver dragon's glare. Ren, attempting to diffuse the volatile situation, interjects softly that he is used to such valuations and tells Kjels and the others it is fine. The rival leader, recovering his composure but clearly rattled, scoffs and decides to withdraw. He rationalizes that with dozens of parties gathered, the specific composition of Ren's group doesn't matter. They are all just numbers in the swarm attacking the demon general. He hints that his own party, composed of elite knights, will claim the glory regardless. As they turn to leave, he drops a final barb, identifying his group as a world-class party that people have been talking about, though he admits they haven't reached the legendary status of Elmikia Dusk just yet. He waves dismissively, leaving Ren with a condescending farewell. Ren watches them go, his face tight with a mix of relief and lingering shame. Elise breaks the tension, scoffing at the departing knights. She asserts that such a mediocre bunch stands no chance against the demon general of Blaze. In fact, she predicts they will struggle to even defeat the general's subordinates. She cynically notes that their only value lies in serving as a distraction, holding off the fodder while Ren's party focuses on the main threat. Ren is shocked by the cold calculation but absorbs the reality that the enemy they face is a candidate for the title of Demon King. Night falls over Geo, the moon hanging full and bright above the stone architecture. Ren sits alone on a low wall, the events of the day weighing on him. Fear approaches him, her silhouette illuminated by the moonlight, and asks if something is wrong. Ren confesses his internal turmoil. Despite his training, the encounter with his upperclassmen and the looming battle has forced him to confront his own immaturity. He clenches his fist, admitting that the prospect of facing an unknown monster like Akendia terrifies him. Fear listens silently, her expression softening. Ren, vulnerable in the moonlight, asks if she will walk with him, seeking her company to settle his nerves. Fear praises his humility, calling it one of his excellent points, and agrees to stay by his side. She steps closer, the distance between them closing as she reveals that there is something she wants to give him before the battle begins. Ren looks up, surprised, as Fear prepares to bestow a gift that could turn the tide of the coming war. Elise extended her hand, pressing a mystical artifact toward Ren, an object imbued with the capacity to bridge the gap between a human and the ancient forces of summoning. She offered the tool not as a mere trinket but as a necessity for one still unacquainted with the intricacies of spirit manipulation, granting him the artificial ability to interact with the ethereal realm. Ren hesitated, his gaze lingering on the offering, grappling with the weight of accepting such power before his training had truly solidified. He questioned the propriety of taking it, but Elisa's resolve remained unshaken as she clasped his hands around the stone, solidifying the transfer of the gift. She insisted that his diligent efforts warranted the aid, framing the powerful item as a simple good luck charm to ease his burden. Suddenly, the door to the room burst open, interrupting the solemn moment as Fear leaped into the frame, her energy instantly shifting the atmosphere. She announced her return with boisterous enthusiasm, immediately noting Ren's presence and the transaction taking place. Not to be outdone by Elise, Fear declared her intention to provide a gift of her own, referencing an archangel's feather she had procured during her walk. She leaned in, her expression shifting to one of playful instruction as she explained the mechanics of the invocation tool Ren now held. To perform the rituals required for summoning, one needed to construct a high-grade hallowed space to synchronize wavelengths with the spirits, a feat the stone would facilitate. Ren examined the object, confusion evident in his posture as he tried to grasp the abstract concepts fear threw at him. Fear, undeterred by his bewilderment, launched into a visceral, almost nonsensical explanation of the mental state required for summoning. She waved her multiple arms in exaggerated motions, describing the process with sharp, onomatopoeic sounds, a ping, a whoosh, and a thesi, miming the act of emptying the mind and forming a concrete mental image. She clarified that while ancient summoning typically involved spirits, the principle remained the same for summoning material objects. She urged him to attempt calling forth something tangible, asserting that if he could summon spirits, matter should be within his reach. Ren stared at the amber-like stone in his palm, the weight of expectations settling upon him. He closed his eyes, centering his focus as he attempted to follow fear's chaotic instructions. He sought to purge his thoughts, creating the mental void she described, and then filled that void with the visualization of an object intimately familiar to him. The world around him faded as he poured his concentration into the resin, the air crackling with the gathering energy of the ritual. A sudden flash of light erupted from his hand, illuminating the room and blinding the onlookers for a split second. As the brilliance subsided, a heavy, bound book materialized in the air above his open palm, hovering in the space he had carved out with his will. Fear grinned, her eyes sparkling with amusement and genuine surprise at his immediate success. She revealed the true nature of the stone he held. It was no ordinary amber, but a resin condensed from thousands of years of prayer within the realm of the dead, sealed by her own magic. She casually mentioned that the item possessed a value capable of purchasing an entire city, a revelation that caused Ren to recoil in shock, his hands trembling as he realized the astronomical worth of the charm he had been casually handling. Elise stepped forward, observing the summoned object closely. She identified it as the textbook Ren had used during his school days, deducing that his rapid progress stemmed from his strong familiarity with the item rather than raw power alone. Elise challenged him to maintain the summon, setting a benchmark of 1 hour for the exercise. However, no sooner had the words left her lips than the book disintegrated into particles of light, vanishing back into the void. Ren watched in dismay as his success evaporated. Elise explained the fundamental laws of material summoning. It was constrained by time and causality, and without a sustained anchor, the object would inevitably return to its point of origin. She elaborated that the strength of the link between the summoner and the item dictated the ease of the summoning, particularly over long distances. Since the textbook was something Ren had used for years, the connection was robust enough to bridge the gap, even if only for a fleeting moment. The lesson concluded abruptly as Elise declared that enough training had been done for the day. Ren questioned if the cessation was due to his lack of skill, but Elise corrected him, her expression darkening with serious intent. She revealed the true reason for the invocation tools. Their enemy, Akendia, possessed strength so overwhelming that even she would struggle to face it alone. She described the terrifying attributes of their adversaries, angels capable of erecting multi-layered barriers, dragons with scales harder than steel, and demons cloaked in deadly miasma. The tools were not meant to be crutches for his magic, but safeguards for his life, imbued with the power of an archangel and a demon lord to offer protection where his human frailty would fail. Ren absorbed this information, his grip on the stone tightening. Elise drove the point home, instructing him not to depend on the tools but to strive to protect himself with his own strength. She warned him that for a normal human, the protection offered by the artifacts was excessive, yet necessary given the caliber of their foe. Ren asked about his offensive capabilities, specifically inquiring if his current sword would suffice in the coming battles. Elise did not mince words. She stated flatly that continuing with his cheap blade was out of the question. Against Akendia, a mundane weapon would not just be ineffective, it would be reduced to rubbish the moment it made contact with the demon's miasma. She insisted that he needed a spirit armament sword, specifically referencing Elaline's blade, Vierge, as the standard of weaponry required to survive. Before Ren could fully process the need for a legendary weapon, the conversation was cut short by a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Elise and Fear turned their heads simultaneously, sensing a disturbance. Outside, the tranquility of the day shattered. Smoke billowed into the sky, and the distant roar of monsters echoed through the streets. The city was under attack. Aerial beasts swarmed the skyline, raining destruction down upon the buildings. Fear identified the attackers as subordinates of the demon general of Blaze, noting the intensity of the flames rapidly consuming the urban landscape. Elise quickly formulated a plan, acknowledging that their previous disguise, which had allowed them to walk unnoticed, had also prevented them from intercepting the threat earlier. Fear lamented the missed opportunity to stop the invasion with brute force, but Elise dismissed the regret, focusing on the immediate necessity of defense. They sprang into action, rushing toward the chaos. In the street, they encountered a wandering beast and a creature identified as an Elmikia Dusk tearing through the cobblestones. A male ally with a sword stepped forward to engage the monsters, taking command of the city's defense and ordering Ren and the others to head for the mountain summit to secure the objective. Ren hesitated, torn between following the order and the carnage unfolding around him. He urged the women to go ahead, his attention snagged by a piercing scream emanating from a nearby burning manor. Without waiting for a response, he broke away from the group, sprinting toward the collapsing structure. The heat was intense, flames licking at the walls as he navigated the debris. He shouted into the smoke, searching for the source of the cry. Under a pile of shattered timber and stone, he found a young girl, trapped and terrified. Adrenaline surging, Ren heaved the heavy debris aside, freeing her from the crushing weight. He scooped her up, assuring her safety, but as he turned to escape, a massive shadow fell over them. High above, through the hole in the burning roof, a colossal, monstrous entity descended, its presence signaling a threat far greater than the flames. Ren cradled the unconscious girl in his arms, his boots skidding against the stone debris as the massive Elmikia Dusk loomed above, blocking all avenues of escape. Despair threatened to paralyze him as he scanned the ruins for a path that did not exist, his mind screaming that this was a dead end. A voice resonated within his consciousness, asking if he could hear it, piercing through his panic. Ren's eyes widened, the realization striking him that this presence had been calling out to him constantly, waiting for him to listen. He acknowledged the voice, his internal resolve solidifying as he confirmed the connection. A small, luminous spirit materialized before him, its form radiating pure energy as it initiated a chant. Sing, the world's gate, RH/Hekali Selah. Ren thrust his hand upward, channeling the surge of power. A blinding sphere of light erupted from his palm, expanding violently to repel the falling debris and clearing the immediate danger with explosive force. As the dust settled, Fear rushed into the clearing, her expression frantic as she located Ren. She immediately checked on the girl in his arms, relieved to find her safe, while Ren stammered an apology for his reckless disappearance. Fear cut him off, asserting that his actions had saved a life, and urged him to focus on the mission ahead. She displayed a map detailing the dire situation. Weaker parties had been annihilated by the Elmikia Dusk, and the demon general of Blaze, Akendia, awaited at the summit amidst a thick demon miasma. Elise and Fear lamented the lack of cooperation among the party leaders, which had led to this collapse in defense. High above on the rocky slopes, two demon subordinates, Kana and Rana, observed the group. They mocked the human struggles and decided to turn their intelligence gathering into a race, competing to see who could report to Lady Akendia first. Elise watched them flee, noting with disdain that these two were originally her own subordinates who had betrayed the current demon lord. She dismissed their importance, warning Ren that demons were resilient and numerous. Suddenly, chaos erupted nearby as a massive beast lunged at a pair of exhausted students. Ren shouted a warning, sprinting toward the danger. He intercepted the beast, unleashing a burst of flame that sent the creature reeling. The rescued students stared in shock, recognizing the spirit salamander at Ren's side and questioning when he had learned to summon such entities. Ren deflected the praise, attributing the feat to the high-grade tool Fear had given him, and ordered the survivors to push toward the summit. Meanwhile, near the crater of the great volcano of Gallia, a squad of human knights confronted a lone woman standing amidst the jagged rocks. The leader demanded she retreat, but the woman, Akendia, merely scoffed at the human joke. Before the knights could react, a new threat descended from the sky, Me, the imitation, one of Akendia's 3 elite subordinates. Perched casually atop a massive, spiked sphere, Me announced that she would handle these insects, while her mistress attended to more interesting guests. She unleashed a barrage of ice and spikes, engaging the knights to clear the path. Further up the mountain, Elise and her group encountered Neshika, the reflection, another of Akendia's elites. Neshika bowed mockingly, expressing honor at meeting the former demon lord, Elise. Elise recognized Neshika's ability to reflect spells, a dangerous counter to her own magic-focused combat style. Neshika taunted Elise, claiming that in her current weakened human body, there was no spell she could cast that Neshika could not reflect. Simultaneously, fear found her path blocked by the third elite, Veldred, the armament. Veldred, clad in heavy armor, acknowledged Fear's status as a second-tier archangel. Fear, moving with blinding speed, engaged him instantly, declaring she had no time to dance but apologizing for the brevity of the fight. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed, Veldred vowing to halt her progress while Fear made it clear that defeating him was merely a step toward her goal. She noted that while fighting alone would be difficult, the combined might of herself, Elise, and Kjels would not fall short against the demon general's forces. At the summit, Ren and Elise finally stood before Akendia. The demon general expressed mild surprise that they had come in person, musing on the 305 years that had passed since her last confrontation with the legendary party. She scrutinized Ren, searching for traces of the hero Elaline, but concluded he was merely a regular student knight, lacking the aura of a hero. Akendia turned her attention to Elise, pitying her former master's reduced state. She appealed to Ren, suggesting that he, as a human who understood his place, should betray Elise to help restore her to her true form of beauty and brutality. Ren rejected the offer flatly, questioning why he would ever follow someone weaker than himself. Amused by his insolence, Akendia decided to crush them, launching a devastating attack aimed squarely at Ren. Elise intercepted the blow with a powerful kick, shattering the energy blast and telling Akendia to shut up. She stood defiant, though Akendia noted that Elise's power was only 30% of her peak. Unfazed, Akendia unleashed her trap. A massive magic circle expanded beneath Elise, activating an anti-draconic barrier. Chains of light erupted from the ground, binding Elise and searing her with agonizing energy. Akendia smirked, declaring she had prepared this countermeasure specifically for the former dragon princess. As Elise screamed in pain, Ren lunged forward, refusing to abandon her. He drew his sword and roared the name of his spirit, Salamander, diving headfirst into the barrier to shatter the trap and save his companion, even as Akendia unleashed a swirling vortex of wind to stop him. Amidst a shower of luminous shards, a young girl with short hair stands contemplating her predicament, seemingly unfazed by the chaos surrounding her. She weighs her options, deciding to conserve her strength for a confrontation with Akendia, but a voice interrupts her thoughts, questioning if she possesses a last resort. The atmosphere shifts violently as energy swirls around her, prompting a shocked observer to stammer in disbelief as the girl undergoes a dramatic metamorphosis, reverting to a form not seen in years. The light intensifies, coalescing into a commanding silhouette that looms over the battlefield. Emerging from the radiance stands the demon imperial princess, Elise de Maria Blaze, now restored to her true regal stature. Dark, ribbon-like tendrils of energy unfurl from her back as she addresses her witness, declaring that they are the first to behold this body in the decades since her reincarnation. Her gaze sharpens, promising to teach them a terror that even demons dread, demanding they consider witnessing her true form a privilege. A fox-eared observer, trembling on the ground, calculates the immense cost of this transformation, noting that maintaining such a powerful original body consumes vastly more energy than her childish guise. She estimates that Elise can only sustain this form for a few minutes, reasoning that if she can withstand the onslaught until that limit is reached, victory for Akendia remains assured. Elise, overhearing or anticipating this logic, laughs shrewdly, admitting that she has resigned her position and lost her followers, leaving her as nothing more than a mere demon. Yet, images of her new life flash through her mind, the young man with dark hair, the fox-eared girl, and their quiet moments together. She proclaims that she no longer commands subordinates like the one before her, but instead stands alongside irreplaceable comrades. She defines them as friends of equal status, nothing more, and asserts that her frugality with time stems solely from her desire to rush to their aid. The fox-eared woman on the ground looks up, noting the profound change in her former mistress's demeanor. Elise focuses her resolve, determined to witness with her own eyes the possibilities dormant within the fake hero known as Ren. She acknowledges the value of journeying with equal companions, finding the concept not entirely disagreeable. Meanwhile, on a desolate, rocky wasteland, the subject of her thoughts lies motionless. Ren, battered and exhausted, sprawls across the unforgiving earth, his sword lying just out of reach. Slowly, Ren pushes himself up, grimacing as he realizes he may have overexerted himself. Towering over him stands a woman of imposing elegance, Akendia, who observes his struggle with cold detachment. She remarks on his resemblance to Elaline and confirms his name, demanding to know his intentions now that his hope of protecting Kjels seems futile. Rin remains silent, his gaze fixed on the ground as he gathers his strength. Akendia presses him, inquiring about the nature of his bond with the woman he fought beside, recalling the war from 300 years ago. Rin dismisses the history, stating that in the heat of the moment, he had no time for such considerations. Finally looking up, he declares he has two things to say. First, he poses a sharp question, demanding to know why she is betraying Elise. Gripping the hilt of his sword, Rin stands firm, his knuckles white with tension. He admits that while he is not the legendary Elaline but merely a fake hero, he still possesses his own pride. He asserts that he does not mind the title, provided he can uphold his promise to form a party with his friends. Akendia listens, finding his sentiment regarding betrayal and friendship interesting, though she views it through the lens of her own power. Ren shouts that he will never forget the brave spirit he witnessed when she protected him from the wyvern, refusing to accept her betrayal of her precious friends. Akendia scoffs at his defiance, reminding him of the vast chasm between their strengths, dismissing him as a mere human and a little fool. Undeterred, Ren raises his voice, swearing on the promise he made to Kjels that he will never retreat. He declares with absolute conviction that he is going to beat her, right here and now. In a burst of motion, Ren initiates his attack, crying out the name of the fire spirit, Salamander. Akendia accepts the challenge, asking if they shall end this, as flames erupt from the ground beneath them. A series of massive, spherical explosions tear through the battlefield, engulfing the rocky terrain in fire and smoke. From the inferno, a small, draconic spirit wings its way through the chaos. Akendia observes the spirit, acknowledging that it certainly favors Ren. She notes with amusement that he is using Salamander to interfere with her own flames, causing them to detonate prematurely, a trick he has employed for the second time. Through the clearing smoke, Ren charges forward, surrounded by swirling vortices of fire and debris, his expression intense. Akendia reacts instantly, unleashing a massive omnidirectional blast of force to repel him. The blast tears through the ground, but Ren persists. Akendia, sword in hand, clashes with him, confident in her defenses. She identifies the source of his resilience, a feather from Fear Senpai and a gem from Elise. With their protective power, she believes she can defend herself against his strikes. Suddenly, as her blade connects, Ren's image flickers and distorts. To her shock, the figure she struck dissipates into nothingness, a mirage. Akendia quickly deduces the mechanic. By using waves of intense heat, Ren warped the layers of air to manipulate light, creating an illusion. She commends him, realizing he must have learned this ancient summoning technique in Canaan, the Holy Land, and expresses surprise at his combat sense. However, she laments that she could not end the fight with a single attack. A moment later, the real Rin stands at a distance, panting. Akendia sighs, disappointed, reading his expression which betrays his failed attempt to catch her off guard. She compares him to Kjels, stating that both of them are too early in their development to face her in battle. Deciding to escalate the conflict, Akendia questions if 1,000 degrees is too hot for a human to endure. She points out that since this heat is natural physics and not a spell, he cannot simply protect himself with anti-magic defenses. She taunts him, noting that while Salamander controls fire, it cannot interfere with molten rock. The ground beneath Rin begins to liquefy, glowing with intense heat as lava begins to flow. Rin curses, commanding Salamander to follow him as he attempts to outmaneuver the surging molten earth. A massive wave of lava crashes down, and Akendia watches with a smirk, mocking his attempt to hold back the flow with his spirit. She predicts that the stone will simply melt away his defenses. Rin, desperate, prays for just one instant of success. As Rin swings his sword in a wide arc to deflect the torrent, Akendia reveals the true nature of her attack. The lava she creates does not merely flow. At her command, she triggers it to explode. A massive detonation engulfs Rin, shattering the ground and sending debris flying. Emerging from the smoke, Rin lunges at Akendia again, his face contorted with effort. But Akendia, anticipating his tactics, recognizes the deception immediately. A mirage? She shouts, realizing he has employed the same trick a second time. The illusionary Rin shatters into wreckage the moment it nears her, his sword crumbling against her barrier. From a distance, the real Rin lands safely on a rocky outcrop, watching his decoy fail. Akendia stands amidst the dissipating illusion, genuinely shocked that a mere human could conceive of such a strategy in the midst of a crisis. She admits to herself that if his blade had been forged by a famous swordsmith, she might have actually taken a wound. Ren gasps for air, his chest heaving. Akendia addresses him with a newfound seriousness, realizing the truth of the situation. She calls out to him, sharing a revelation. The one thing demons fear most in humans is how quickly they grow stronger. Ren listens, sweat dripping from his face, asking what she means. Akendia decides she can no longer afford to toy with him. She initiates the forbidden chapter of Blaze, summoning the deep crimson world. She declares her intent to smash him here and now, recognizing that someday soon he will become a genuine threat. As immense power gathers around her, holding limitless light, heat, and flame within her grasp, she proclaims her title once more, the Demon General of Blaze. Akendia's power erupts mercilessly, signaling the beginning of a battle that will decide their fates. Ren grits his teeth, his face contorted in a grimace of sheer exertion as the onslaught from above intensifies. The rain of blazing light descends upon him relentlessly, forcing him to acknowledge that his defensive barrier has reached its breaking point and can no longer ward off the attack. Refusing to succumb, he shouts a denial against the encroaching defeat, his eyes wide with desperation. With a sharp exhale, he shifts his strategy from passive defense to active interception. Ren moves with blurred speed, parrying each individual drop of magical flame the distinct instant it comes within lethal range. He weaves through the bombardment, his sword a blur as he deflects the pouring rain of fire himself, refusing to let a single ember touch his skin. Watching from her vantage point, the Demon General Akendia offers a word of genuine praise for the spectacle, calling it wonderful. She recognizes the technique immediately, identifying it as the fruit of Kjel's rigorous training. However, the difference in power remains absolute. Akendia's expression shifts to a cold, predatory smile as she declares it is simply too early for him to challenge her. She commands her magic to burst open, detonating the energy around him. A massive, blinding explosion engulfs the battlefield, shattering the ground and sending shockwaves tearing through the air. Ren is caught in the epicenter, his form obscured by the violent discharge of black and white energy. On the scorched slopes of the great volcano of Gallia, along the third route to the summit, a fox-eared girl lies prostrate on the ash-covered ground. Fear, battered and trembling, whispers a curse at the absurdity of the situation as lightning crackles around her prone form. She struggles to lift her head, her thoughts racing toward the boy who just took the brunt of the explosion. She tracks the trajectory of the battle, realizing how far they have fallen down the mountainside and how much time has passed without their return. The realization strikes her with physical force. Ren is deliberately placing himself in the path of Akendia's explosive spells solely to protect her. Her fist clenches into the dirt as she processes the tactical suicide of his actions. She knows that he must understand the reality of the situation, yet he persists. She acknowledges the harsh truth that Akendia is not an opponent Ren can defeat alone. Tears stream from Fear's eyes as she screams into the dirt, demanding to know why everyone she cares for hurries off to die, leaving her behind in their wake. She scolds the human race for their ridiculous tendency towards self-sacrifice. Her grief hardens into resolve as she declares that she will not allow it. She refuses to accept that Ren, the one she offered her hand to, might disappear here. Memories of the First Sword Emperor Elaline, who also offered his hand to her in the past, fuel her determination. She defiantly proclaims that she definitely does not want that history to repeat itself. Power surges from the girl's small frame as she issues a command to her own soul. Identifying herself as the Princess of Dragons, she chooses to abandon her human form. She calls for the transformation to occur with beautiful cruelty, accepting the cost of her true nature. In a blinding flash of light, her human silhouette dissolves, replaced by the majestic, towering form of a white dragon. The dragon spreads its massive wings, intercepting the battle with a roar that shakes the heavens. However, the burst of power is momentary. The dragon form dissipates almost as quickly as it appeared, leaving Fear kneeling on the rocky slope, gasping for breath. She questions if she regained her true body for only a single second, the effort leaving her drained. Ahead of her, Ren lies motionless on the mountainside. She calls out to him, begging him to wait for her. Akendia looks down at the battered boy, her silhouette casting a long shadow over him. She admits that he has endured much for a mere human, but observes that he has finally reached his absolute limit. She critiques his performance, noting that while he bears an outward resemblance to the legendary hero, enough to handle her subordinates, He is still far from being Elaline. Ren's hand twitches, reaching out to grasp the hilt of his weapon, which lies shattered on the ground. He forces himself up, his body screaming in protest, blood dripping from his chin onto the dry earth. He stands on trembling legs, a broken sword in hand, refusing to stay down. Akendia watches him rise, questioning his sanity, asking if he truly intends to stand there and mock her with his persistence. She asks if he simply does not understand the reality of his defeat. Ren smiles through the blood masking his face, his eyes burning with undiminished light. Akendia lists his failures. His sword is broken, his body is tattered, and he has no means of calling for reinforcements. She demands to know what he hopes to accomplish in such a wretched state. Ren's answer is simple and profound. He declares that he wants to be a member of their party. He clarifies that he wishes to stand with those three, Elise, Kjels, and Fear, in truth, not just as a burden. He envisions a future where he travels the world with them, flanked by the angel, the dragon, and the demon. He shouts that he cannot lose here because he wants them to see him as a real comrade. Akendia snarls, telling him to know his place. Ren ignores her dismissal, his mind racing as he analyzes the battlefield conditions. He notices that Akendia is attempting to cast a healing spell on her stomach to recover from the damage inflicted by Kjell's earlier punch. Ren realizes that if he is ever going to retaliate, the moment is now. Panic momentarily sets in as he looks at his empty hands and broken blade. He acknowledges that he lacks a functional sword and cannot execute a decisive attack with his own power. Yet a realization dawns on him. He does have one thing left. He pauses, his grip tightening on the fragmented hilt. Akendia interrupts his thoughts, reminding him that she is not limited to aerial attacks. She gestures, and dark energy gathers around her. She lectures him on the nature of spirits, stating that a spirit does not act without its summoner's order, implying his previous defenses were merely reactions to what he could see falling from above. Therefore, he is vulnerable to omnidirectional assaults. Ren is struck by a wave of invisible force, crying out in pain as he is knocked back. Akendia looks at him with pity and boredom, asking what that expression on his face signifies. She declares the fight already over, noting she still has to deal with the three main players, Elise, Fear, and Kjels. Akendia decides to end it. She casts red stars, summoning massive orbs of destructive energy to rain down from the sky. As the bombardment begins, Ren sees his opening. He notes that she is aiming at him from the sky, which is exactly what he needs. The earth erupts as the red stars impact, tearing up the landscape. Through the chaos, Akendia speaks, admitting that Ren was entertaining for a human. She deduces that he has been holding his power back the entire time, conserving strength so he could eventually fight alongside Kjels and the others. Massive pillars of rock and debris are blasted into the air as the spell devastates the area. She concludes that this divided focus is the reason he will lose. Suddenly, Akendia spots Ren charging through the dust. Her eyes widen as she recognizes the distortion in the air, a mirage again. But she remains unconcerned. She sees the boy sprinting with a broken hilt, completely defenseless. She mocks him, thinking that a broken sword will never penetrate her protective miasma. Ren sprints with desperate speed, his face a mask of determination. He screams his internal logic aloud, accepting his weakness. He knows he is 100 times weaker than the demon general before him. Therefore, to win, he can only borrow the power of those stronger than her. He invokes the artifacts and lessons he carries. He calls upon Elise's gemstone. He calls upon Fear Senpai's feather. He calls upon Kjell's special training. Finally, he cries out the name of the spirit, Salamander. Energy swirls violently around the broken hilt in Ren's hands, responding to the catalyst of the three supreme beings he fights for. The air crackles as a massive blade of pure energy manifests, extending from the ruined weapon. Ren swings the colossal construct with everything he has. It is a flash of Elaline's sword, reborn through borrowed strength and sheer will. He screams for the legendary hero to lend him his strength as he brings the massive blade down toward Akendia. Kjels sprints desperately up the rocky slope, her face contorted with panic as she screams the names of her companions. She pushes her body to its limit, apologizing internally for the time it took to recover her battle senses. Skidding to a halt amidst the settling dust, she cries out, demanding to know where they are. Her breath hitches as she scans the area, her mind racing with the realization that she was delayed while Ren stayed behind to protect her. Suddenly, a brilliant light pierces the gloom further up the mountain. Through the dissipating energy, a lone figure stands tall. Ren, battered but standing, lowers the remnant of his sword as the massive construct of light fades. He looks toward the horizon and declares with quiet finality that he has won. Kyo's stares in disbelief, her eyes wide as she confirms that everyone is safe. Ren turns to her, offering a weary, sheepish smile, and asks if he might receive some praise for his efforts. He admits he did his best, but Kyos remains frozen, unable to process the reality that he has actually defeated the demon general Akendia. Overcome with relief, she rushes forward and tackles him, burying her face in his shoulder as she calls him an idiot, her voice trembling with the weight of her worry. Moments later, the group gathers on the desolate mountainside. Kyos pulls back, her expression stern despite her teary eyes, and extracts a solemn promise from Ren that he will never do something so reckless again without her permission. Ren agrees quietly. Nearby, Akendia sits defeated on the ground, surrounded by her subordinates who have arrived to retrieve her. She accepts her loss with a surprising grace, deciding to return to the underworld. Akendia touches her side, noting that while the wound Ren inflicted has already healed, the fact that a mere human managed to bruise her vexes her pride greatly. She turns her gaze to the small, fox-eared girl, Fear, and asks a lingering question about the past. She demands to know why the Demon King sacrificed herself 300 years ago to protect a subordinate like her. Fear, standing with her hands on her hips, replies simply that she didn't want to see how far Akendia had fallen. Understanding dawns on Akendia. Her master lost her position and was forced into an immature reincarnation solely because of that act of mercy. She smirks, noting the irony of her former subordinate worrying about her. She advises Fear to find a way to restore her true body quickly, declaring that there is no one else in the underworld she would recognize as the Demon King. With a final wave to Ren, she leaves a parting request to take care of Lady Elise before disappearing into the light. Later, in the volcanic capital city of Geo, steam rises from a luxurious hot spring. Elise relaxes in the water, her thoughts drifting to the safety of her companions, while Fear announces she is getting out first. Meanwhile, in a guest room, Ren winces as his wounds are treated. He tries to downplay the pain, insisting it is just a burn, but Fear reminds him that unlike a dragon, he is human and needs time to heal. Fear sits on the couch, reflecting on the battle with a serious expression. She marvels that even with spirit magic and a surprise attack using Elaline's sword, it is astounding that Ren drove off Akendia by himself. Ren remains humble, pointing out that his sword didn't inflict real damage and that Akendia never took him seriously. Fear pours a drink, countering his modesty with the truth. He defeated one of the 5 great disasters. She repeats Akendia's words, emphasizing that the only thing demons fear in humans is how quickly they grow stronger. The door opens and a young woman enters, bowing deeply to Ren. It is the civilian he saved earlier, and she thanks him profusely for his heroism. Ren sits on the couch, stunned and touching his chest, realizing this is the first time someone has ever come to thank him for his help. Fear grins mischievously, holding up a news magazine. She reads the headline, Reincarnated Knight. The article describes a party of 4 who drove off a great disaster, speculating that the legendary party of heroes has revived. Fear notes that while no one actually believes they are the real figures, the story is spreading throughout the world. Ren asks if they should correct the misunderstanding, but Fear suggests they let the world say what it wants. Ren decides to embrace the momentum. He declares that they will proclaim it across the land. They will compete against the world and all other parties to find the Encore before anyone else. He affirms their identity not as fakes, but as the true heroes who will save the world, the Encore. Unknown entities issue a stern, commanding dismissal to those they deem impudent, warning that no further cautions will be granted before demanding their immediate departure. Shadows flee in a panic, their silhouettes blurring against the backdrop as they retreat from the overwhelming pressure. As they scramble away, the fleeing figures converse with urgency regarding the return of Sister Kyos, lamenting the deplorable state of affairs that she remains in the company of such an inferior species. Their panic hardens into resolve as they determine that the Princess of Dragons must be forcibly reminded of her true station and heritage. Seizing upon the timing as opportune, the conspirators vow to terminate her quest for the Encore right then and there. The scene shifts dramatically to the sprawling, sun-drenched expanse of the volcanic capital city Geo, where white stone architecture climbs the mountainous terrain, dominated by a massive cathedral clock tower overlooking the urban labyrinth. Perched within a high room, Fear leans heavily against a cushion, her expression drooping with profound listlessness as she declares her boredom to the empty air. She glances toward Ren, who suggests that she take a walk outside to alleviate her stagnation. Fear immediately shoots down the proposal, predicting that their presence among the humans would only incite a chaotic uproar. She turns the inquiry back on Ren, noting that he had returned from his own excursion almost immediately and demanding to know what transpired. Ren recounts his brief and frantic venture into the city, explaining that he tried to explore but was instantly besieged by a massive crowd clamoring for autographs and handshakes. He reveals that the populace, fooled by his uncanny resemblance to the legendary hero Eline, relentlessly badgered him about his lineage. Ren confesses that the attention became suffocating, and he fled simply to escape the overwhelming scrutiny. Fear, unfazed, remarks that even she was initially deceived by his likeness to the hero, advising him to resign himself to this destiny as she is already accustomed to such fanfare. Seeking a reprieve from the stifling city atmosphere, Fear pivots the conversation to a new proposal, asking Ren if he would be interested in visiting a hot spring resort. She explains that the administrative paperwork regarding their compensation for defeating the entity Akendia has concluded, leaving them free to indulge. At that moment, Elise bursts into the room, announcing her return and immediately latching onto the topic of the hot spring with enthusiasm. Ren expresses surprise at Fear's knowledge of such leisure spots, prompting Fear to boast that if they were to visit, the establishment would likely book the entire venue solely for their use. Elise chimes in, detailing the miraculous properties of the springs, noting that the waters are so potent in curing wounds that they are revered as healing water. However, Fear's interest visibly sharpens when Elise mentions a special confectionery sold there known as Hot Springs Buns, famous for their perfect sweetness and tendency to sell out instantly. Fear's demeanor shifts from casual interest to intense determination as she declares that they absolutely cannot miss out on these buns, commanding Ren to depart immediately. Elise adds that every girl, whether human or angel, loves a good bath, reinforcing the plan. Upon arriving at the resort, the group stands in the opulent hallway where Ren attempts to clarify the logistics, assuming that the men's and women's baths are separate. Fear interrupts him, stating that even if they wish to converse, they can do so while soaking, casually brushing aside his concerns. Ren freezes, a cold sweat breaking on his brow as he asks if this is a joke. Fear confirms with absolute seriousness that she has reserved a mixed bath, envisioning a scenario where both sexes calmly unwind under the steam clouds in a state of complete nudity. Ren panics at the revelation, but Fear dismisses his shock, framing it as a valuable life experience. The scene transitions to the open-air hot spring, a spacious rock bath surrounded by steam and nature. Fear and Elise navigate the water in their swimsuits, while Ren attempts to make himself invisible by hugging the rocky wall in the corner. Fear calls out to him, urging him not to hide and offering to wash his back like a big sister. Ren stammers a refusal, preferring to stay hidden, his face flushed with embarrassment as he notes the presence of swimsuits. Ignoring his protests, Fear lunges through the water and captures Ren in a tight embrace from behind, shouting, "Gotcha!" as she presses against him. Ren flails, accusing her of doing this on purpose, to which she feigns ignorance before admitting she cannot help it because he is simply too cute. Elise, observing the scene with a deadpan expression, reprimands the love-crazed angel for trying to seduce Ren at every opportunity. Fear denies the accusation, claiming Ren said something similar, but Elise snaps back, calling her a liar. The atmosphere settles as the three relax in the warmth. Elise sighs contentedly, remarking that the hot springs feel as though they are healing wounds that are 300 years old. Fear mocks her, noting that she sounds like an old granny. Elise ignores the jab, lamenting the lack of quality liquor to complete the experience. Ren, meanwhile, admits that the embarrassment is finally starting to catch up with him. Suddenly, Fear's tone shifts from playful to attentive as she orders Ren to show her his arms and back. Fear closely inspects the burn mark left on Ren's body by Akendia, her fingers tracing near the wound with concern. She expresses relief that it hasn't become infected, noting that it would be terrible if the injury worsened. Ren realizes that her earlier antics masked a genuine worry for his well-being and thanks her. The solemn moment is quickly broken when Elise splashes water at them, demanding they stop smirking and creating a private world. Fear retaliates, splashing back while claiming she was only concerned that Ren's injury might hinder their journey, though her flushed face suggests otherwise. As the water settles, the conversation turns to their primary objective. Fear brings up the topic she wanted to discuss earlier, their next destination. Rin recalls that she claimed to know something about the location of the Encore. Fear explains that for 100 years, human parties have scoured the globe searching for the Encore but have failed to find it. She deduces that the Encore must be hidden in the one place humans have been unable to enter for the past century. Rin asks if this untouched land will be their next target. Fear confirms this but admits she has no fond memories of the place. She outlines 2 specific goals for this journey. First, to confirm interesting information she possesses regarding the search for the Encore, and second, to regain her original form. As she stands amidst the rising steam, the silhouette of towering cliffs appearing in her mind's eye, she names the legendary hidden domain, the Valley of Dragons, Rienferial. She declares this place to be her homeland, the dwelling place of her brethren, setting the stage for their entry into the legendary territory. Kjels reflects on her diminished state, calculating that only by restoring her true dragon form will she possess the strength required to challenge even a single member of the 5 great disasters. She acknowledges that her powers remain largely dormant, suppressed by a seal that has held for 300 years, leaving her unable to fight at her full potential. This realization, solidified during recent combat, drives her resolve to return to the unexplored region where her kind gathers, the Valley of Dragons. The scene shifts back to the open-air bath, where the steam softens the atmosphere but fails to dampen Ren's curiosity. He presses Kjels for details regarding her transformation, asking if she becomes massive upon reverting to her original self. He speculates, using his hands to gesture, wondering if she resembles a wyvern or perhaps a particularly muscular dragon. Kjels deflects the inquiry with a sharp refusal, turning her head away as she asserts that her dragon form is the epitome of refinement, reminding him of her status as the Princess of Dragons. Ren twitches at her defensive tone, while Elise observes the exchange, her expression unreadable. Fear shifts the conversation to a graver matter, reporting a rumor she heard regarding one of her kin flying over the capital the previous day. She connects this sighting to a potential rival, Cheyenne, the master swordsman. She explains that Cheyenne's party, the Spirit Inspectors, has successfully surveyed numerous sanctuaries and ruins, earning them recognition as the group most likely to locate the Encore. Reports indicate that Cheyenne, currently ranked as the highest swordsman and viewed by many as the modern-day Alaline, has visited the Valley of Dragons to investigate. Elise interjects, recalling a specific route Alaline utilized during his own travels, a shortcut through the ancient tombs. She suggests they take this path to reach the valley via the shortest route, despite the inherent danger. Kjels agrees but issues a stern warning to Rin to remain vigilant. However, the gravity of the planning session is undercut moments later when Kjels complains about her attire. She laments that her serious, cool lines are undermined by the cute white swimsuit she is forced to wear, arguing that it strips away all dramatic tension. She fidgets uncomfortably, explaining it was the only garment that fit, insisting the fashion choice is not her fault. The party transitions from the leisure of the springs to the rugged terrain of the wilderness. They traverse a rocky path flanked by towering cliffs before descending into a dense forest. Ren, carrying a heavy pack and his sword, follows the girls through the undergrowth until they stand before a stone structure consumed by vegetation. The entrance to the tombs looms ahead, a dark portal framed by weathered stone pillars. Kjels notes that once they navigate through this subterranean passage, the Valley of Dragons will be within striking distance. As they step across the threshold, Ren nearly collides with the others, urged by Elise to do his best. Inside, the air grows heavy, and Elise mentions that the tombs are the subject of interesting rumors, fueling her desire to witness the location firsthand. Their progress halts immediately upon spotting a standing fire bowl, its flame dancing in the stagnant air. Ren observes the light, deducing that another party must have arrived before them. Kjels surveys the ancient masonry, speculating that portions of the labyrinth remain unexplored and that it is not unusual for adventurers to delve into these depths. Elise's competitive streak ignites. She frames the expedition as a race, suggesting that if they locate the treasure first, they claim ownership. Kjels warns her to calm down, reminding her that looting is not their objective. Ren, gazing down at the stone floor, expresses caution, noting they have no knowledge of what awaits them and that rushing ahead invites danger. The corridor abruptly terminates at a fork, splitting into 2 distinct paths. Ren asks how they should proceed, and Elise volunteers her services. She explains that at times like this, a thief's skills are paramount for detecting traps. She elaborates that demons possess the ability to sense evil, allowing them to perceive malice. Since a trap is essentially a physical manifestation of malice, she can detect them with ease. Despite Ren's skepticism about trusting her senses, Elise decisively chooses a path, claiming it looks significantly more fun than the alternative. She leads them down a brick-walled hallway and stops before a specific section of the wall. Pointing to a small, depressed brick, she identifies it as a trigger mechanism designed to launch poison arrows. She instructs Ren to dodge, and with a mischievous grin, she presses the stone, shouting, "Take this." The wall erupts with mechanical violence. A volley of arrows shrieks through the narrow space. Ren hits the floor in a panic, scrambling to avoid the projectiles. When the dust settles, Kjels and Elise stand amidst the scattered arrows, completely unharmed and unimpressed. Kjels brushes off the danger, stating she cannot stand touching such things, while Fear expresses disappointment, having expected at least 2 more volleys to make it exciting. Ren, pulling himself from the ground, demands to know why Elise triggered the trap on purpose. Elise reveals her twisted philosophy. She finds it far more interesting to identify the traps someone worked hard to set up and then deliberately trigger them to break through with a laugh. She argues that this method provides entertainment, though Ren retorts that her innocent smile clashes with the wickedness of her actions. Elise confirms Ren's suspicion that she intentionally selected the path with the higher density of traps. Ren protests, arguing they do not need additional risk, but Elise dismisses the other path as boring, claiming only monsters are goofing around over there. Suddenly, the wall beside them explodes inward, debris showering the corridor. A massive, scaled creature bursts through the masonry. Ren recoils, shouting that it is a dragon, but Kjels corrects him instantly, offended by the comparison. She calls him an idiot, identifying the beast as a mere wingless lizard and warning him not to insult her kind by grouping them with such a creature. The beast lunges. Ren draws his sword but finds his movements restricted by the narrow architecture of the hallway. He realizes he cannot generate enough swing to penetrate the creature's thick scales. Forcing himself to concentrate, he identifies the only vulnerability. As the lizard snaps its jaws, Ren drives his blade downward, striking the center of its head with precision. The beast collapses. Kjels observes the kill, remarking that it is no surprise Ren is becoming proficient with cheap tricks. Ren, wiping sweat from his brow, asks if that was a compliment, admitting the encounter gave him chills. Kjels elaborates, explaining that his method is the quintessential human way of fighting, surviving through technique when raw strength is insufficient. Before they can recover, voices echo from the darkness ahead. A man speaks, acknowledging that a spell failed to bring the beast down and reprimanding his companion, Plumir, for neglecting her training. He instructs her to double her efforts. The speaker steps into the light, a tall, bald man with a muscular build, accompanied by a smaller, hooded female figure. He notes that someone beat them to the kill. Assessing Ren, Kjels, and Elise, he deduces they are a newly formed party. With a calm but imposing demeanor, the man, addressed as Master Tyrus, urges Ren and his companions to turn back immediately. The stone corridors of an ancient ruin, where the air hangs heavy with the dust of ages and the weight of magical confrontation. A formidable group known as the Canaan Pilgrimage Doctrine ship stands positioned against the protagonists. This party, hailing from the Holy Land of Canaan, a region renowned for its deep-rooted faith in spirits, radiates an aura of disciplined power. They are led by a man recognized as Saint Ares, a figure of significant renown, whom one of the onlookers identifies with a mix of awe and suspicion as the Ancient. The imposing bald monk, a master of physical and spiritual arts, towers over the scene, his stoic expression betraying no weakness, while his companion, a beastkin girl named Plumir, stands dutifully by his side, acknowledging his commands with a sharp, respectful affirmation. The bald monk, his eyes narrowed in scrutiny, addresses the group before him, a young boy and 3 girls of tender years. He questions their presence in such a dangerous location, suggesting that their youthful appearance makes them ill-suited for the perils that lie ahead. He hypothesizes that they are mere travelers, perhaps students who have finished their education and are now wandering in search of the legendary Encore, the treasure of the world's end. Ren, the black-haired protagonist, confirms their identity with a flustered honesty, admitting that they are indeed the party in question. The monk, maintaining a facade of benevolent concern, advises them to turn back. He urges them to challenge simpler ruins to gain experience before attempting to navigate this tomb, warning that difficult traps and ferocious beasts await anyone foolish enough to proceed. He mentions that other parties are also scouring the tomb, implying that the competition is fierce and deadly. However, The blonde demon girl, Elise, sees through this feigned concern immediately. Her lips curl into a knowing smirk as she confronts the monk, accusing him of harboring a complicated ulterior motive beneath his advice. She declares with supreme confidence that they have already deduced the true reason for the Canaan party's presence. Elise steps forward, her sharp eyes locking onto the monk's impassive face. She reveals that a strange scent has permeated the air ever since a party of the spirit faith entered the ruins. There is only one conclusion to be drawn from such a phenomenon. Somewhere deep within this ancient tomb lies a spirit Denver. The revelation hangs in the air, charging the atmosphere with tension. The monk's stoicism cracks slightly as he acknowledges the accuracy of her deduction, complimenting the blonde human for her honesty, though his eyes remain sharp and calculating. The monk shifts his focus to Ren, his gaze piercing through the boy's unassuming exterior. He notes that although Ren's expression remained unchanged, the invisible barrier covering his body shuddered for a split second upon hearing the mention of the spirit Denver. This subtle reaction betrays a power and awareness that belies Ren's harmless appearance. The monk's suspicion deepens as he connects the dots, realizing that this group matches the description of the reincarnated night party, the 4 adventurers rumored to have crushed one of the 5 great disasters at the volcanic capital. Ren, scratching his cheek awkwardly, attempts to downplay the title, explaining that it was a name bestowed upon them by others rather than one they chose for themselves. Despite realizing their strength, the monk remains firm in his objective. He states that his group has a specific task to complete before exploring the rest of the tomb and that they cannot afford interference. He deems Ren's group too suspicious, their true identities and motives shrouded in too much mystery. The tension escalates as the monk issues a final, chilling ultimatum. If Ren's party follows them any farther, the Canaan group will deem them dangerous adversaries and remove them by force. With that stark warning, the monk and Plumir turn their backs and stride away into the darkness of the corridor, leaving Ren and his companions to deliberate their next move. Ren watches them leave, noting that their guard is completely up. The group gathers to discuss their options. One of the girls asks if they should retreat the way they came, but the allure of the spirit den is too strong to ignore. Elise, undeterred by the threat of traps, argues that the path ahead, though dangerous, is shorter and leads directly to the area with the strongest scent of spirits. She points out that the Canaan group chose the path infested with wandering beasts, leaving the trap-laden route open for them. She reasons that if they can navigate the traps, they will reach the Valley of Dragons more quickly, making it the superior strategic choice. Elise turns to Ren with a mischievous glint in her eyes, suggesting that if the spirits in the den take a liking to him, the number of entities he can summon might increase. The prospect of expanding his magical arsenal convinces the group. Ren agrees, and they resolve to press forward through the trap-filled corridor. As they prepare to move, Elise takes charge, promising to guide them and warn them of any hidden dangers. In a quiet moment before they advance, Ren stands alone in the dim light of the stone hallway. He raises his hand, focusing his spiritual energy. He begins to chant in the ancient tongue of spirits, sing, the world's gate, Arich/Hekili, invoking a summons from the ether. A small, glowing salamander spirit materializes in the air before him, its fiery form casting dancing shadows against the brick walls. Elise praises Ren's summoning skills, but Ren explains that he didn't even need to issue a command. The passageway was simply too dark, and he thought to illuminate it with fire. The spirit, possessing a will of its own, chirps happily, asking to go together, a voice that only Ren can hear. The party moves deeper into the corridor, the salamander floating above Ren like a spectral lantern. Ren explains to his confused companions that he has recently started to hear the voices of spirits more clearly, a development that likely occurred after their battle with Akendia. As they walk, Elise spots a suspicious crack in the cobblestone floor. She points it out to Ren, who cautiously asks if it will activate upon being stepped on. Before he can even finish his sentence or heed her warning to be careful, Elise casually steps directly onto the pressure plate with a blithe, sorry. I already did. The reaction is instantaneous. A massive, spherical boulder plummets from the ceiling, crashing down with earth-shattering force directly where the party stands. Dust and debris explode outward as the heavy stone impacts the ground. In the chaos, Elise's voice cuts through the noise, commanding, "Sleep, all of you," as she unleashes a burst of power to mitigate the disaster. The dust settles, revealing the party shaken but alive. Ren, dusting himself off, remarks on the elaborate nature of the trap, realizing that the mechanisms guarding this tomb are lethal and numerous. Elise, unfazed, simply suggests they keep going. Further down the hall, the group encounters a large, deep crimson ruby embedded in the center of a brick wall, displayed like a prize. Ren and the others stare at it, disappointed by the obviousness of the lure. One of the girls comments on how childish the trap seems compared to the previous boulder, wondering if anyone would actually be tricked by such a blatant bait. However, Elise interrupts their mockery, chiding them for their shallow thinking. Determined to prove a point, Elise strides up to the jewel and grabs it firmly with her hand. She declares that the jewel itself is not the trap, but merely a diversion designed to draw attention away from the real danger. Ren panics, shouting for her to wait, but it is too late. Nothing happens to the jewel, but the floor beneath Elise's feet suddenly vanishes. The stone tiles retract, revealing a massive pit filled with a bubbling, dark liquid, a pool of deadly poison located directly below the jewel. Elise hovers momentarily in the air, her expression one of bored superiority as she remarks that it looks like an ordinary pool of poison and that she wouldn't want her clothes to get wet. Ren, reacting with desperate speed, lunges forward to catch her before she can fall or before the trap escalates further. The two tumble onto the safe ground away from the pit. In the confusion of the landing, Ren's hands accidentally find purchase on Elise's chest. Elise flushes, her composure breaking as she stammers and scolds him for his shamelessness. Ren frantically apologizes, insisting it was an accident, while Elise calls him a naughty idiot. They quickly untangle themselves, the awkward tension dissipating as they survey their surroundings. They find themselves in a large, circular chamber with high ceilings and ornate pillars, a safe zone amidst the traps. Elise declares it the perfect timing to rest for a bit. Ren, resigned to his role, begins to unpack their supplies to set up camp. Elise, recovering her haughty demeanor, demands sweets, ordering Ren to get to it immediately. The party settles down in the spacious room, preparing to recover their strength before venturing deeper into the mysteries of the tomb. The flickering light of a campfire dances against the cold stone walls of the ruins, casting long, erratic shadows. Ren sits alone on a makeshift bench of stone, exhaling a breath of relief as a small, glowing salamander spirit materializes before him. The creature hovers with a gentle luminescence, chirping a query about their solitude, to which Ren nods, acknowledging that the spirit chose to expend the energy to manifest only because they are currently alone. Ren leans forward, his elbows resting on his knees, and speaks softly to the floating entity. He asks if the spirit tires from appearing so frequently, his voice laced with genuine concern as he assures the creature that it is permitted to rest. The salamander, however, dismisses the worry, conveying its intent to keep watch over him, though it apologizes for causing him anxiety. Ren observes the bond forming between them, noting with a faint smile that the spirit has grown quite attached to him. The quiet intimacy of the moment is contextualized by the sleeping arrangements of the party nearby. Ren reflects on the logistical error of placing fear in the middle of the group, a decision that resulted in a sleepless night due to the cramped conditions. A voice breaks his reverie as Kairi, the dragon princess, wakes and sits up, asking if he roused her. Ren's internal monologue notes the discomfort of being pressed against her ample chest while she slept, recalling how she tends to become affectionate and huggy in her slumber. Kairi shifts the topic to Ren's magic usage, observing that he always keeps the salamander close. She warns him that sustaining magic for extended periods places a significant burden on both his body and spirit, asking pointedly if he feels fatigue. Ren denies it, claiming he is fine. Kairi studies him, her expression softening as she remarks that such an attitude is typical of him. She notes that most humans would only concern themselves with the power extracted from a summon, yet Ren worries more about the spirit's exhaustion than his own. Ren admits to this prioritization, scratching his cheek awkwardly. Kairi leans in, the firelight illuminating her features, and suggests that his uniqueness lies not in the amount of power he draws, but in his care for the spirit itself. She posits that whether he deserves praise depends on his future relationship with these entities, theorizing that his aptitude for ancient summoning stems not merely from innate talent or birthright, but from the content of his character. Ren, taken aback by the depth of her analysis, asks if she is paying him a compliment. The conversation drifts to their current predicament with the Canaan pilgrimage doctrine ship. Kairi dismisses the threat posed by the rival party, stating that handling hostile humans is a routine occurrence back in the Dragon Valley. She declares with casual confidence that if they bare their teeth, she will simply knock them out of the tomb, though Ren worries that such aggression would invite an investigation from the Holy Land. He notes that the Canaan group is completely on guard against them, and they must avoid revealing their true objective of hunting for spirits. Curious about her origins, Ren asks what kind of place the Dragon Valley is. He recalls learning at the academy that it is an unexplored region where the world's dragons gather, assuming that as the Princess of Dragons, Kairi must be a distinguished figure there. Kairi corrects him, explaining that dragon society is a meritocracy based on age and size. However, she was an anomaly, born stronger than all others. She was feared by her own kind and honored as a princess solely out of terror. Her expression turns melancholic as she describes the isolation of her power, noting that simply existing caused fear in her kin. This changed only when she joined Elaline's party decades ago. For the first time, she met companions who stood close to her without fear, a memory that brings a gentle smile to her face as she admits she was happy. Ren expresses his desire to hear these stories, asking what it was like to adventure with the legendary hero Elaline. Kairi reminisces that it wasn't just Elaline, but also Fear and Elise. They clashed openly, brawled, and bickered, yet traveled the world as equals who could discuss anything, visiting places no one else had ever seen. Ren listens, captivated by the image of true camaraderie. He asks who commanded the valley in her absence. Kairi reveals she left it to her little sister, not a blood relative, but a dragon with whom she swore sisterhood. Ren is surprised by the term, and Kairi elaborates that this sister is a supreme dragon rivaling even a heavenly silver dragon like herself. She names her as the Soul King Dragon Carla, a miraculous being born with the blood of every dragon lineage. However, Kairi notes that Carla vehemently opposed the journey to find the Encore. When Kairi announced her intention to search for Elaline's legacy, Carla resisted. Ren argues that it makes sense for comrades to search for their friend's legacy, but Kairi explains that dragons operate on a different logic than humans. She apologizes for the somber turn in the conversation. Kairi stands up to return to the tent, dismissing her sister's opposition as mere grumbling. As she turns, Ren notices dust clinging to the back of her dress and points it out. He offers to brush it off, instructing her not to move. Kairi asks if there is still some left, unaware of the impending awkwardness. In a fumble of movement, Ren's attempt to clean the dust results in him grabbing the hem of her dress, accidentally pulling it and making contact with her body. Kairi lets out a startled cry, her face flushing crimson as she leaps away, shouting, "Idiot," and accusing him of targeting her sensitive part again. Ren frantically apologizes, insisting it was not his intention. The atmosphere remains charged with embarrassment as Kairi clutches her dress, stammering that her heart was not prepared for such sudden contact. Ren averts his gaze, sweating nervously. The awkward silence is broken by a sudden tremor shaking the ruins. Ren remarks that the shaking feels nostalgic, reminding him of Elaline fighting the underworld alone. Kairi counters that they were all defeated back then, even with the battle-happy archangel present. She explains that the celestial goddess Risfrez forced a peace treaty, effectively discarding Elaline's strength and philosophy. She mentions rumors that Elaline confronted the goddess directly to stop the quarreling with the celestial realm, a feat that makes Kairi feel insecure about her own strength in comparison. The conversation shifts to training. Elise and Fear appear, dissecting Ren's combat abilities. Kairi points out that while Ren is a knight who relies on technique, he decisively lacks the pure physical ability that Elaline possessed. The others agree, stating he needs a minimal amount of physical power to truly grasp Elaline's divine swordsmanship. Elise advises him to find a weakness and attack it with a single, decisive strike, rather than just locating it. They bring up the concept of a dragon's reverse scale, a single inverted scale among the tough hide where pain-sensing nerves are concentrated. Removing it inflicts agony on any dragon, making it a critical weak point. However, Ren realizes it isn't that simple. A normal knight's cut wouldn't even scratch a young dragon's reverse scale. Elise confirms that a slash with the power to break the scale is essential, combining sword technique with raw force. She urges him to hurry up and get stronger. The ground shakes violently again, interrupting the lesson. From ahead, she detects the smell of a spirit mixed with the wavelength of human magic. Ren steels himself, declaring he is always ready. The party rushes forward, turning a corner to confront a new threat. Ren gasps in recognition as they encounter a massive golem blocking their path, realizing that the other group, or perhaps a guardian, awaits them. Ren and the others stumble upon the Kanan party engaged in a desperate struggle against a massive, stone construct. A golem, towering and relentless, dominates the chamber, its stony fist descending with crushing force toward the young beastkin girl, Plumir, and the newly arrived Ren. The bald monk, Master Tyrus, reacts with blinding speed, intercepting the attack to shield his subordinate. He admonishes Plumir amidst the debris, questioning the wisdom of looking away in the midst of battle, his voice stern yet protective as he holds her clear of the impact zone. Tyrus does not hesitate. With the golem looming over them, he shifts into an offensive stance, his muscles tensing as he unleashes a technique known as severing cross. His movements blur, striking the construct with such velocity that he appears to be in two places at once, a feat that leaves Rin watching in awe, marveling at speed that creates afterimages. The attack connects with devastating power, shattering the golem's massive arm and sending shards of rock flying across the ruins. Plumir, rallying to her master's side, acknowledges his command with fierce loyalty. However, the victory is short-lived. The golem's shattered limb begins to reassemble immediately, the stone fusing back together with unnatural speed. Plumir cries out in dismay, realizing that their attacks are insufficient against a foe that mends no matter how badly it is damaged. Tyrus assesses the situation with a cold, tactical gaze, recognizing the troublesome structure of the beast. He concludes that greater firepower is required and instructs Plumir to strengthen her spells to delay the creature until the rest of their party arrives. Elise, watching the stalemate with a bored expression, interjects with a provocative offer. She asks the monk if he would like to swap places with her since he seems unable to defeat it. Tyrus, maintaining his composure, advises her to calm herself, though he acknowledges that their coordination was not bad. He explains his theory that total destruction, reducing the golem wholly to rubble, is the only way to halt its regeneration. Elise scoffs at this brute force logic, declaring it nonsense and claiming there is a much simpler method. Elise steps forward, her demeanor shifting from mockery to terrifying grace. She begins an ominous chant, her voice weaving a spell known as the Dream of Ruin, invoking imagery of a bier of black lilies. The air grows heavy with dark magic as she completes the incantation. The effect is instantaneous and absolute. The golem does not merely break, it disintegrates, crumbling into nothingness as if the stone itself lost the will to exist. Tyrus stares at the empty space where the monster stood, his stoic mask cracking in shock. He identifies the magic immediately as a curse of collapse, a forbidden art that only demons are capable of wielding. He turns his gaze to Elise, noting that he has never seen such a magic circle before. Elise remains coy, refusing to explain the mechanics of her spell, but she pointedly reminds him that she assisted them, regardless of her true motives. Tyrus, regaining his dignity, bows his head slightly and apologizes for the delay in expressing his gratitude, acknowledging that she indeed saved them from a difficult predicament. With the immediate threat removed, the tension shifts back to the mystery of Ren's group. Elise, satisfied with her display of dominance, pushes Ren forward to handle the social maneuvering, praising him patronizingly as a good kid. Tyrus focuses his scrutiny on the boy, observing that Ren appears to be the most ordinary among his extraordinary companions. He demands to know who they are and why they are present in these ruins. Ren meets the monk's gaze and answers with simple logic. Since the Canaan party is here, they must have deduced the same truth, that a spirit resides somewhere within these ruins. He points out that the Holy Land of Canaan is the world capital of the spirit faith, making their objective obvious. Tyrus concedes the point, confirming that their mission is indeed the investigation of spirits inhabiting the world. He reveals that on this day, they are specifically investigating the underground shrine of Iskasel. The monk surmises that the spirit they seek must be close. Plumir attempts to interject, worried about revealing Lady Ares' secret instructions to outsiders, but Tyrus silences her concerns, noting that their previous conversation has already allowed Ren's group to infer the rest. He explains that the golem was acting as a guardian, standing in the place of the spirit's dwelling. Ren realizes that the time for talk has ended. His companions urge him to focus, sensing the signs of the spirit's presence nearby. He steps away from the group, moving toward a specific section of the wall that seems to hum with invisible energy. His companions warn him to be on guard, asking if he can hear the call. They remain behind, revealing a crucial limitation. Only humans can enter the dwellings of spirits, meaning the demon, dragon, and former archangel cannot follow him. Ren places his hand near the stone surface. Suddenly, the space around the wall begins to warp and twist violently. A vortex of magical energy swirls open, confirming the existence of the spirit's Denver. His companions shout warnings as the distortion intensifies, realizing he is about to be physically pulled into the unknown realm. Ren stands at the precipice of the spirit world, the gateway opening to swallow him whole. The world dissolved into a blinding wash of white light, the transition instantaneous and jarring as the group found themselves transported from their previous location to a vast, unfamiliar landscape. Ren recoiled, his heart hammering against his ribs, startled by the sudden shift and the overwhelming brightness that assaulted his vision. Beside him, Tyrus stood stoic and unmoving, his gaze sweeping across the endless dunes of white sand that stretched toward a horizon dominated by a blazing, sun-like orb. Tyrus identified the phenomenon immediately, his voice cutting through the silence to declare that they had stumbled into a spirit's den. Ren, still reeling from the displacement, scanned the area, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible geography that had replaced their reality. On the ground nearby, Plumere groaned in discomfort, clutching her body as the aftereffects of the forced transportation wreaked havoc on her physical form. She complained of pain in her hips, her posture crumpled and vulnerable against the stark white sands. Tyrus, maintaining his commanding presence, wasted no time on sympathy. He ordered Plumere to stand immediately, his tone brokering no delay. She acknowledged the command with a submissive stammer, forcing herself upright despite the lingering pain. Ren, seeking logic in the chaos, questioned the spatial mechanics of their situation, asking what had become of their previous location. Tyrus, ever the knowledgeable guide, explained that their physical coordinates had likely not shifted in the traditional sense. Instead, he theorized that they had been forcibly dragged into a pocket dimension, a space molded and warped by the immense power of a resident spirit to suit its specific environmental preferences. The landscape itself served as evidence of the spirit's identity. The endless, rolling dunes and the oppressive brightness suggested a creature of the earth. Tyrus deduced that for a gnome, this barren yet majestic desert would be a most agreeable dwelling. However, the discovery brought immediate suspicion to Tyrus's mind regarding Ren's capabilities. He turned his sharp gaze toward the young man, interrogating him on how he had managed to pinpoint the location of such a high-ranking spirit's lair. Finding such a den typically required exhaustive, methodical searching or advanced magic, yet Ren had navigated them there without utilizing any fundamental detection spells. Tyrus demanded to know the method behind this impossible feat, his suspicion mounting. Ren, caught off guard by the intensity of the questioning, stammered as he tried to formulate an explanation. He pointed vaguely in the direction they had traveled, explaining that he had merely looked that way and heard a voice. It had been nothing more than a faint whisper, barely audible, but distinct enough to guide him. This revelation struck Tyrus with the force of a physical blow. His composure cracked as he grabbed Ren, incredulity washing over his features. The idea that a human could hear the voice of a spirit was a concept that defied standard magical understanding. Tyrus's mind raced with the implications, his suspicion deepening as he considered the anomalies surrounding Ren. He recalled that Ren's other companions had been unable to enter the spirit's den, a fact that added another layer of mystery to the situation. Overwhelmed by the rapid-fire interrogation, Ren protested, unable to keep up with the barrage of questions Tyrus hurled at him. Tyrus demanded to know the true nature of Ren's party, specifically the girls who traveled with him, his voice rising in demand for the truth. However, the urgency of their current predicament forced Tyrus to shelve his interrogation. He acknowledged that failing to address the spirit before them would be fatal, and he regained his composure with a deliberate cough, apologizing for his rudeness. Changing the subject back to the hunt, Tyrus noted that his own detection spells were coming up empty, sensing absolutely nothing in the vast emptiness. He turned to Plumere, who held a complex, circular spirit tool in her hand, and asked for her status. She shook her head, reporting that even with the intensified call of the tool, she could find no trace of the entity they sought. Irony struck immediately. Just as the experts declared the area empty, Ren felt a persistent tugging at his pant leg. He looked down to find a small, robed figure standing quietly beside him, its presence completely masking itself from the sensors of the experienced mages. Ren interrupted the conversation, pointing casually at the creature and suggesting that if they were looking for gnome, this small being might be the target. Tyrus froze, his eyes widening in shock as he beheld the entity that had appeared without a sound. Ren, crouching down to eye level with the creature, asked directly if it was gnome. He confirmed with a bright smile that this felt like the right entity, noting that he could hear the voice clearly now. The spirit, a diminutive figure with large, dark eyes peering out from under a heavy hood, reacted to Ren's recognition with visible delight. It beamed, its small mouth curving into an innocent smile as it began to speak in fragmented, childish concepts. It referenced playing and making something again, echoing a desire it had held, like before. It expressed that it had been waiting for a long time for someone to arrive, specifically waiting for Ren to come and engage with it. The innocent request to play hung in the air, ominous despite the cute delivery. The spirit's definition of play manifested violently. The ground erupted as massive shards of stone and compressed earth coalesced into a towering, humanoid form. Tyrus realized with a start that the guardian they had encountered previously was not a trap set by others, but a creation of Gnome's own making. The massive golem loomed over them, a construct of jagged rocks and raw power, standing as the physical avatar of the spirit's desire. Chaos erupted as the golem swung a massive, rocky limb, shattering the earth where Rin stood only a fraction of a second prior. Rin scrambled backward, dodging the lethal impact as debris sprayed across the desert. The small spirit watched the destruction with innocent glee, repeating its request to play. Ren, frantically evading another crushing blow that kicked up a cloud of dust, yelled out in confusion, questioning how a battle for their lives could possibly be interpreted as a game. Tyrus, observing the scene with a tactical eye, confirmed Ren's ability to communicate. The spirit was indeed calling this violence play. Tyrus explained that spirits possessed an extraordinary, almost childlike inquisitiveness toward humans who could perceive their voices. He noted that he had heard similar accounts from Lady Ares, confirming that this behavior was consistent with high-level spiritual entities. Ren, dodging through the dust, quickly deduced the rules of this twisted game. The spirit was expressing affection in its own alien way, welcoming them by offering a doll to play with. The logic followed that if the golem, the doll, was the object of the game, then destroying it would end the session. Ren reasoned that breaking the toy would either satisfy the spirit or cause it to lose interest, thereby opening a path for them to escape the dimension. He shouted this theory to the group, confident that this was the key to their survival. Tyrus accepted the hypothesis immediately, his demeanor shifting from observer to combatant. He tightened the black mask over the lower half of his face, his eyes narrowing with lethal intent. He declared that he had no intention of letting this game drag on. He would end it with decisive speed. Ren, concerned about the overwhelming power of the golem, asked if Tyrus was sure about taking on such a dangerous role alone. Tyrus dismissed the concern, ordering Ren and Plumir to provide support while he confronted the beast head-on. He confirmed their names quickly, ensuring tactical clarity, and stated that the golem posed not the slightest problem for a warrior of his caliber. With a burst of movement that defied visual tracking, Tyrus vanished from his standing position. He moved as a blur, a streak of motion that rendered him invisible to the naked eye as he flanked the massive earth construct. Ren gasped, his eyes struggling to follow the movement, awestruck by the sheer velocity Tyrus displayed. In the blink of an eye, Tyrus had already navigated the battlefield and positioned himself directly behind the golem, leaving the massive construct swinging at empty air. Ren shouted Tyrus's name, watching the master at work. Tyrus launched a devastating strike, his body coiled with kinetic energy as he unleashed a blow against the golem's rocky exterior. The impact resonated through the cavernous space, the force of the attack chipping away at the massive stone limb. Tyrus landed gracefully, assessing the damage immediately. He noted that while the attack was better than he had anticipated, it was technically a miss in terms of total destruction. As Tyrus retreated from the immediate kill zone, he called out to Plumir, signaling the next phase of their coordinated assault. Plumir responded instantly, her spirit tool glowing as she prepared to intervene. Tyrus relayed critical tactical data as he moved. The golem was not made of ordinary earth. It possessed a density and hardness that matched its terrifying appearance, heavier and more durable than any natural stone. Despite the durability of their opponent, Plumir steeled herself, clutching her magical implement with determination. This time, she resolved, their combined efforts would shatter the spirit's toy and end the game. Tyrus stood before the regenerating behemoth, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed the construct's physiology. He deduced that this golem's enhanced durability stemmed from a fundamental difference in material composition compared to the previous one, a necessity given its significantly larger build. Beside him, Plumir gasped in disbelief, unable to comprehend how her magic, which had decimated the previous foe, failed to leave even a scratch on this new adversary. Tyrus explained that their prior opponent was merely clumped earth, fragile despite its regenerative properties, whereas this guardian was built to be impenetrable. However, the monk's sharp eyes had already dissected the enemy's defense mechanism. He noted that the golem had instinctively raised its arm to shield its throat the moment Plumir launched her spell. He directed their attention to a hairline crack in the creature's neck, identifying it as the location of the core crystal that bound the golem's composition together. Crushing that crystal was the only path to victory. Ren observed the towering giant, his mind racing through tactical simulations. He realized that a direct jump to the throat was impossible, as the golem would simply swat them out of the air. His gaze flickered to the side, his thoughts drifting to the powerful female companions who had accompanied him. He briefly wondered why the warrior who had dispatched the earth golem previously did not step in to assist them now. But he quickly banished the thought, steeling his resolve. He recalled his desperate battle against the demon general of Blaze, a memory that solidified his understanding that he would inevitably face solitary battles where no support could be expected. This was his fight, and there was no opponent more suitable for testing his limits than a spirit. Ren issued his commands, requesting that Tyrus and Plumir lend him their techniques to facilitate his strategy. Plumir hesitated, confused by his intent, but Tyrus accepted the dangerous gambit, declaring that he would divert the golem's attention. Ren clarified his orders to the mage. She was not to aim for the throat, but to strike the legs when an opening presented itself. As Plumir stammered about the futility of repeating a failed attack, Ren grinned, his eyes locked on the summit of the beast, declaring he would ascend directly to it. Plumir screamed a warning, deeming the plan reckless, but the execution had already begun. Tyrus moved with blinding speed, drawing the golem's focus, while Ren launched himself into the fray. With a burst of kinetic energy, Ren leaped onto the massive, shifting arm of the construct. He sprinted along the rocky limb, his blade drawn. Tyrus, watching the boy navigate the treacherous, moving terrain, noted that while Ren's swordsmanship was rough, his footwork betrayed a history of disciplined training. The monk admitted to himself that while he possessed the speed to lead the beast around, he lacked the raw strength to destroy it. To bridge this gap in power, Tyrus initiated a high-level incantation, invoking the elements of fire and wind. He called out to Plumir to synchronize with him. A torrent of magical energy erupted, engulfing the golem in a blinding flash. The small, hooded gnome spirit watched the spectacle with wide, curious eyes. However, as the smoke swirled, Plumir cried out in panic, realizing their combined fire was ineffective against the dense armor of the construct. Tyrus remained undeterred. He issued a command to a higher power, ordering Salamander to act. The air distorted as the true spirit of fire manifested, amplifying the explosion with divine intensity. Plumir stared in shock, realizing Tyrus had summoned the real Salamander, a feat that allowed them to overturn the massive golem through sheer force. The explosion rocked the cavern, destabilizing the giant and leaving it vulnerable. Seizing the chaos, Ren reached the summit. He drove his sword downward with all his might, targeting the exposed crack in the golem's throat. The blow connected, shattering the core crystal. The massive stone form collapsed, signaling the end of the conflict. The gnome spirit, far from angry, appeared before Ren with a bright, innocent demeanor. It expressed that the battle had been fun and invited Ren to call upon it any time to play again. Ren, exhausted and disheveled, stammered a confused reply as the spirit grabbed his leg, but the game was officially over. The scene shifted back to the ancient stone ruins. Ren stood catching his breath, reunited with his 3 female companions. One of the girls, observing his condition, remarked that he seemed to have gone along with the spirit's play. She asked if he and the spirit had become friends, to which Ren awkwardly agreed. The atmosphere grew serious as the blonde-haired woman, a figure of significant grace, confronted Ren about his ability to hear the voices of spirits. Ren tried to deflect, claiming someone like him couldn't possibly possess such a gift, but she pressed on, noting that the spirit's attachment to him had turned into a misfortune for the group. Tyrus intervened, apologizing for the interruption but stating they also had questions for Ren. He asked directly if Ren had previously received the teachings of the saint in Canaan. The blonde woman's eyes widened in realization. She identified the ability to hear and summon spirits as the unique province of the saint, Lady Ares, asserting that only she in this generation should possess such power. Overwhelmed by the implications, the woman offered to arrange an audience for Ren at the temple, urging him to speak with Lady Ares if he truly possessed these qualifications. She grabbed Ren's hand, her demeanor shifting from interrogation to intense interest. Tyrus, however, cut through the moment with a sharp warning. He noted that her immediate move to recruit Ren into her party based on his words was a dangerously deep reading of the situation. The woman, realizing her forwardness, pulled Ren into an embrace, declaring possessively that Ren was already a member of their party. She looked at Ren with a captivating gaze, asking for his confirmation, leaving the boy flustered and trapped in her arms. Tyrus watched the interaction with a stoic, knowing expression. The blonde woman stepped back, smoothing her composure. She admitted that she had no intention of hiding her identity, introducing herself as an adherent of the Holy Land Canaan. She explained that discovering a human capable of summoning the spirits they worshipped naturally caused her concern. Tyrus countered by revealing his own suspicions. He had deduced that the three women were not who they appeared to be, citing their strange behavior during the battle where they made no move to help yet showed no fear of the spirit's den. Acknowledging the stalemate, the woman noted that Tyrus and his group had left in a hurry, but fate had allowed them to meet again regardless. Tyrus accepted this, predicting their paths would cross again on the road to searching for the Encore. He called for Plumir to depart, but offered one final piece of advice to Ren. If he ever visited Canaan, he should present himself before Lady Ares, as it would be a valuable experience. As Tyrus and Plumir exited the ruins, the tension dissipated into a lighter atmosphere. The twin-tailed girl patted Ren on the back, teasing him about his sudden surge in popularity. The blonde woman, eager to move on, announced that with the spirit matter resolved, their next objective was to leave the ruins and immediately find the road to the Valley of Dragons. The group emerged from the dark stone corridor into the blinding light of the outside world, the exit framed by massive, craggy cliffs. High above them, standing precariously on a jagged precipice overlooking the vast canyon, a solitary figure waited. The wind whipped at her robes as she stood as a silent sentinel. The caption identified her simply as Sister Kjels. The group stood before the precipice of a new domain, the unexplored region known as Re-Inferial stretching out before them as the wind whipped around the jagged cliffs. This was the home Kjels had left behind, a place steeped in ancient history and power. Dominating the landscape was a colossal stone gate set directly into the towering rock face, its sheer size eliciting a stunned reaction from Ren. However, the majesty of the entrance was marred by a massive, jagged hole smashed through its base, a testament to raw, destructive force. Kjels dismissed the damage with a casual air, explaining that someone in a bad mood had once knocked on it, causing the formidable structure to crumble. Kjels noted that while the celestial realm and the underworld possessed similar barriers to separate their domains, this particular gate had lost its true meaning. The destruction of the physical barrier meant that humans could now intrude into the dragon's territory as they pleased. She elaborated on the geopolitical reality of their world. The underworld's natural environment was so hostile that humans fell apart quickly and were forced to retreat, while the gate to the celestial realm remained largely inaccessible to mankind. Consequently, human curiosity and interference were funneled almost exclusively toward the dragons. Despite the open path, the party came to a halt. The blonde-haired angel, Elise, and the demon girl with twin tails remained behind with Tyrus. They were bound by an ancient pledge established 300 years ago in the wake of the hero Elaline, a pact that decreed dragons, angels, and demons must never tread upon each other's territory to maintain the peace. The demon girl offered Ren a confident thumbs up, her expression mischievous yet reassuring, telling him to run back immediately if the situation turned dire. She promised that if he fled to them, they would be able to act, preventing the dragons from doing anything foolish. Ren swallowed his nervousness and accepted the arrangement, acknowledging that it would be just him and Kjels moving forward. Kjels turned to him, holding a small sweet, and reassured him not to overthink the danger. She was with him, which meant there was no chance he would face any real peril. As they walked alone through the rocky canyon, the walls rising high on either side, Kjels posed a question that weighed heavily on the atmosphere. She asked Ren if, upon finding the Encore, he intended to return to the Valley of Dragons. Ren reacted with surprise, asking why she would ask such a random question at this specific moment. Kjels reminded him that he had spoken of it before, prompting Ren to admit the truth. He didn't want to think about it. Ren clarified his stance as they walked toward the looming inner sanctum. He explained that coming back here today was not a homecoming visit, but merely a necessary step in their quest to search out the Encore. His desire was not to settle, but to keep seeing the outside world even after their goal was achieved. He looked at Kjels with determination, stating that he followed the three of them because he longed to see the horizon that Elaline saw, the unexplored world that the hero had once traversed. Kjels listened, her gaze drifting downward as she grappled with her internal conflict. She confessed that meeting Elaline had taught her the joy of wandering the world, a freedom that clashed with her born duty as a princess to protect her brethren. She questioned the validity of that duty now, noting that there was no longer a need for her to protect the Valley of Dragons. Since Elaline's intervention 300 years ago, the dragons no longer needed to fear attacks from angels or demons. She revealed that many of her brethren believed her leaving was a mistake, and that sentiment likely persisted. When Ren asked why they wished for her return if they were safe, Kjels dismissed it as a stubborn habit, a tradition upheld simply because it was decided long ago. She expressed a reluctance to consider a future where her only choice was to return to the valley, fearing the loss of her freedom. Ren broke the tension with a bright, confident smile. He told her that if she hadn't found something better than returning to the valley by the time they found the Encore, he would think of something else for her. He vowed to stay with her until she no longer felt uneasy about her path. He reminded her that they were comrades, and that bond alone was reason enough for her to remain in the outside world. Kjels looked at him, a blush coloring her cheeks as she processed his unwavering support. She smiled, genuinely touched, and agreed to keep his words in mind. With her resolve strengthened, she declared that her brethren were waiting and that it was time to move. Ren nodded in agreement, and together they stepped forward to face the dragons, initiating the long-awaited encounter. The atmosphere within the Valley of Dragons shifted perceptibly, the air growing heavy with reverence as Kjels stood before her kin. The massive, scaled beasts lowered their heads, their rumbling voices forming a chorus of praise that echoed off the canyon walls. They commended her for guarding the valley even during her absence, a statement that confused Ren but was accepted by Kjels with a stoic nod. She walked among them not as the companion Ren had traveled with, but as a ruler returning to her domain. Her posture was erect, her expression imperious, and every step she took radiated a dignity that silenced the towering monsters around her. Ren watched her, his hand instinctively clutching his chest as if to steady his own heart against the weight of her presence. He admitted to himself that despite all the time they had spent traveling together, he had never truly felt this level of majesty from her before. The reality of her station crashed down upon him. She was not merely a powerful fighter, but the true princess of dragons, a being of ancient lineage and authority. Kjels turned to Ren, her expression softening slightly but her tone remaining businesslike. She informed him that she needed to speak with Carla, the Dragon Empress, a meeting that would likely take 2 or 3 hours. She explained that she intended to release her seal after the discussion. Her eyes narrowed as she cast a warning glance at the dragons surrounding them, declaring that she would not forgive any rude behavior toward the human she had brought with her. With that final command, she turned and walked deeper into the sanctum, leaving Ren alone in the company of the apex predators. Ren stood awkwardly in the clearing, the sound of shifting scales and heavy breathing filling the silence. He calculated that 3 hours was a significant amount of time, perhaps enough to squeeze in some training to keep his nerves at bay. However, his internal planning was interrupted as a massive shadow fell over him. A white dragon, sleek and elegant, lowered its long neck until it was eye level with the young human. Its golden eyes scrutinized him with an intensity that made Ren flinch. The dragon spoke, its voice a low vibration that Ren felt in his bones. It asked a single impossible question, "Are you Elaline?" Ren recoiled, sweat beading on his forehead. The name of the legendary Sword Emperor hung in the air, a ghost from 3 centuries past. Ren stammered a denial, waving his hands frantically to dispel the misunderstanding. He explained that while many humans at the academy and beyond were startled by the resemblance, he was merely a look-alike, nothing more. The dragon observed him for a moment longer before pulling back, conceding that it was indeed a mistake. The brief interaction, however, triggered a cascade of realization within Ren. He looked up at the towering cliffs that boxed them in, the physical representation of the isolation Kjels had lived with for centuries. The dragon's earlier comment about waiting for Kjels echoed in his mind. He finally understood the root of Kjels' hesitation to return. It wasn't just a desire for adventure, it was a fundamental rejection of this gilded cage. He recalled the disinterested look in her eyes whenever she spoke of her duty, contrasted with the vibrant joy she expressed when talking about the outside world Elaline had introduced her to. She had tasted freedom, and the flavor of it had made the stale air of the valley unbearable. Miles away, at the valley's entrance, the rest of Ren's party waited. The demon girl sat on a rock, swinging her legs casually, while the blonde angel sat beside her, radiating a calm patience. They discussed the inevitable shock the dragons must be feeling at that very moment. The demon girl noted with a smirk that Ren was the splitting image of the Sword Emperor who had invaded the valley 300 years ago, defeated the dragons, and carried off their princess. It was a legendary scandal, and Ren walking in with the same face was bound to stir up ancient memories. The angel, however, pondered a deeper issue. She wondered how Dragon Empress Carla would react to Ren specifically. It wasn't just his face, it was the fact that he was a human accompanied by spirits, a rarity that defied modern magical conventions. She mused that it would be a waste if the dragons dismissed him solely because he wasn't Elaline, failing to see the unique potential Ren held in his own right. Back in the valley, time stretched and distorted. Ren sat alone on a rock, the silence pressing in on him. He checked the position of the sun and realized with a start that 6 hours had passed, double the time Kjels had estimated. The unease that had been simmering in his gut flared into panic. The clearing was empty. He hadn't seen a single dragon in hours. The bustling city of beasts he had walked through earlier was now a ghost town. Driven by a sudden, ominous feeling that something had happened to Kjels, Ren drew his sword and broke into a run. He navigated the twisting stone pathways, his boots pounding against the rock. As he ascended higher into the valley's depths, the temperature began to spike violently. The air shimmered with heat haze, and sweat soaked through his clothes within minutes. Ren gasped, noting that the intensity rivaled the volcanic heat of Gallia. He crested a ridge and skidded to a halt, his eyes widening in disbelief. Below him stretched a lake not of water, but of molten lava. The magma churned and bubbled, casting a hellish red glow over the canyon walls. Ren questioned the logic of the geography. A lava lake in the middle of the Dragon Valley seemed an impossibility. The oppressive heat began to sap his strength rapidly, his limbs feeling heavy and sluggish. He scanned the area, desperate for any sign of life, but the landscape was barren. He wondered if the dragons had abandoned the place entirely. Just as he considered retreating, a pillar of pure white light erupted from a crevice in the rocks ahead. It pierced the smoky sky, a beacon of clean, spiritual energy amidst the sulphurous fumes. Ren moved toward it, drawn by a familiar scent that cut through the smell of burning rock. He squeezed through a narrow gap in the cliff face, emerging into a secluded alcove bathed in the ethereal light. There, curled up against the stone, was a creature of breathtaking beauty. It was a small dragon, its scales the color of pristine snow, its form delicate and bird-like compared to the behemoths outside. It possessed feathery wings that were wrapped protectively around its body. The creature lifted its head, its golden eyes widening in shock as they locked onto Ren. It spoke, its voice trembling with a mix of surprise and mortification. It demanded to know why he had come, stammering that its transformation and sealing were not yet complete. Ren stood frozen, staring at the small dragon. The voice was unmistakable. The presence was undeniable. The white dragon buried its face in its wing, shrinking away from him. It cried out that being seen in this form, this vulnerable, diminished state, was incredibly embarrassing. It was Kjels, stripped of her human guise and her massive draconic armor, revealed in her truest, most intimate form. Ren stood before her, the heat of the lava forgotten, witnessing the secret heart of the dragon princess.